Good evening, my name is Keith Romano, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting for the town of Monroe. Today is, what is today? I don't know. The 11th, December 11th, 2019. The time is 7:04 p.m. The first order of business is a pledge of allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to introduce the members of the commission and staff present tonight. Starting on my far right is Commissioner Clark Gingras, Commissioner Ross Massarocco, Commissioner Jim Stewart, who's also a licensed engineer and surveyor in the state of Connecticut. And joining us tonight is Barbara Schellenberg, who is the town representative attorney. To my left is Jim Weinberg, and Lois Spence, who's our secretary. We have Donna Shazinski, who's our office manager, Denise Halstead, Inland Wetlands agent, and Sarah Stroud is our recording secretary. Before we start, I'll read our mission statement and how the meeting will proceed. The mission statement. The objective and purpose of the Inland Wetlands Commission is to provide for the overall protection and preservation of the inland wetlands and watercourses within the town of Monroe. The procedure. In the normal course of our meetings, we will hear public hearings and other applications. The protocol for public hearings is to have an applicant make a presentation to the commission, during which and after which the commission will be asking the applicant questions. The commission will then review town, staff, and other independent comments. The meeting will then be open for public comment. I will ask that all comments be made to the chair or commission, and after any and all comments pro and opposition of a general nature are made, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. It's not necessary that the applicant respond, but generally in their best interest to do so. There will be no further opportunity for new questions unless new material is entered in as evidence or testimony during their response. Please keep all comments pro and con specific to inland wetlands related matters. Other applications that do not involve a public hearing will follow a similar format, with the exception that there will be no public comments allowed. The meeting follows our published agenda unless otherwise amended. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are not.
Okay. All right. At this time, this is a part of the meeting where we, it's called general public participation. If anybody has anything they want to say to address this commission, now is the time to do so. Oh, okay. Subdivision reports, there's nothing. Regulated activities. We have public hearing, IWC 2019-12, 4 Main Street, 5 Victoria Drive, 7182 and 7192 Main Street, 7182 Main Street LLC, filling and remediation. Lois, I'm going to recuse myself. You can continue.
Okay, we will open this hearing. Mr. Sully?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located at 501 Main Street here in Monroe. I don't know if you guys want to read anything into the record yet.
Do we have the notice of public hearing?
I know I think that's the first step.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we haven't. We'll do it this time. I seriously didn't have it in here. I can get that, but it has been legal noticed. I don't have the copy in the file, believe it or not. Life happens sometimes. I can run down and get it if anyone's questioning it. Sorry.
We can read it into the record after you get.
Yeah, actually, we can read it in during exhibits, probably.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to overlap.
All right. Okay,
That's fine, sorry,
that's all right. No, it's a good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. So we'll get that taken care of.
All right, great. Good evening. I'm here this evening to discuss the proposed excavation and filling permit application proposed at 7180, 7192 Main Street and 5 Victoria Drive. With me here this evening is Jim McManus, our certified soil scientist. I'm going to bring the commission through the overview of the project. I'm going to provide some history, because this site does have some history from a wetland standpoint, and then happy to answer any questions the commission may have. So just to orient everyone, you can see up on the screen, this is an aerial of the town of Monroe. The site's located just north of the town line of Trumbull along Route 25. The site's actually bifurcated by the town line, so the property is actually part in Monroe and part in Trumbull. And the site's actually comprised of 3 different parcels. So again, just to orient everyone, this is a little bit closer. You can see Route 25 runs north-south. Here's the town line. So this site is essentially almost immediately in front of Swiss Army corporate headquarters off of Victoria Drive. And then you can see here, so this is the former Vichy-Vitremont parcel to the north, Swiss Army towards the rear, 5 Victoria Drive, which is currently Ole Soccer. This is a little bit of a different, or this is a little bit of an older aerial. And then again, south of, you can see the town line here runs kind of east-west through the site. So the site's actually comprised of 2 parcels, actually a third, but there's some lot lines modifications going, which I'm going to go through in detail. So to the south, this is 7180 and 7182, excuse me, and 4 Main Street. And then to the north, this is 7180 Main Street in Trumbull. So you can see this is one tax lot, which actually is in both Monroe and Trumbull, and then this is a separate tax lot, which is in both Monroe and Trumbull. And this property line actually shows an expansion of the current limits of the property. As part of this application is including the rear portion of 5 Victoria Drive, which extends back from this location here, and I want to go through some history there. So 5 Victoria Drive, which is currently Ole Soccer, this went through some wetland applications in 2014. So this is an aerial of before the site was developed. This is when actually there used to be a camp here. And you can kind of see where 5 Victoria Drive was, where the Pequannock River kind of came through. And then subsequent to this, there was multiple approvals on the property. L&L Evergreen operated at 5 Victoria Drive for a number of years, operating through an agriculture permit. So that didn't include permit and approvals from the Wetlands Commission. So during their operation, they were a little bit aggressive in their use as a property from agriculture. So when the new property owner for 5 Victoria Drive acquired the property and wanted to move forward with development, we brought in an application to Wetlands to kind of address a lot of the violations that were on the property associated with the operation of L&L Evergreen. So you can see this was their plan, which showed a lot of areas for plant storage, which again was permitted as part of the agricultural use. However, their overall operation resulted in a number of impacts. So what we did, as you can see here, this is an aerial of them while they were in operation. I do want to go back though to this aerial at one point, because I want to talk about this portion to the rear of the property. So this application is actually proposing to convey a portion of 5 Victoria Drive into the property at 7180, 7182 Main Street. And part of that is to address some of the wetland mitigation that was required for this. But I want to just point out here, you can see here, this area, there's a noticeable change in surface elevation kind of through here, where you can kind of notice a shift of where there's a upland vegetation or treed vegetation, then there's a distinct drop off through here, which is an important component to this application, because when L&L Evergreen went through, they showed the entire rear limits of the property. This was the wetland boundary, and what we determined as part of this application was we did some analysis through where the wetlands were back before our client acquired the property, and we identified a number of mitigation areas, and you can kind of see this was the wetland delineation at the time. So this entire back area was considered wetland. However, when we started looking at doing our analysis to understand what impacts were from L&L Evergreen, we kind of came to the conclusion that the rear portion of this property was an inclusion, so that the soil scientists at the time had kind of established this edge, didn't bother going through the thick, forested vegetation and just basically said all of this was wetland. But you can see even through here, there's a distinct limit between what seems to be wetland and potentially upland that's reinforced by looking at the aerial from any disturbance. You can kind of see a similar limit to where there was potentially upland versus wetland. So when we went and permitted this, we identified 5 different mitigation areas that needed to be addressed as part of 5 Victoria Drive. And the portion to the rear, L&L Evergreen, while they had lost this property to the bank, and our client had acquired this from the bank, L&L Evergreen still owned this property and was continuing to violate and trespass on this property. So from a wetlands permit standpoint, for 5 Victoria Drive, we addressed wetland mitigation areas. We labeled them A, B, C, D, and E. E being the portion of the property towards the rear. And because there was an ongoing potential civil issue, when we got permits for 5 Victoria Drive, we dealt with mitigation areas for A through D, and we basically left area E as an issue we were going to deal with in the future as part of, once we had a resolution on how that was going to be dealt with. So this area, a bond was posted by the property owner of 5 Victoria Drive to address this area, which had to happen within 5 years. So this was kind of pulled out from a mitigation area, restoration area E. Subsequent to that, the improvements to 5 Victoria took place. There was extensive wetland mitigation. You can see a large turtle pond which was constructed here, which was in a big area of fill. And I think 5 Victoria Drive now is a great example of how an applicant worked with this commission to develop a way to fix a problem, and it's a nice area now. It's a contributing part of the community. I take my kid to soccer there on Saturday mornings. It's great. Now brings us to the rear portion of 5 Victoria Drive, Restoration Area E, which had not been addressed as part of this and kind of pushed out into the future. The current property owner of 5 Victoria Drive has this rear portion which really isn't usable to him. So he's worked out an agreement with our applicant, the property owners of these properties, where we're basically looking to convey and transfer a portion of this property to this applicant to potentially use that to do 2 things. 1, to be the verb to address this mitigation area, and 2, to clean up and remediate some of the areas through here. As part of our investigation associated with this application, we did test pits back here. We did a test pit right here in the center. We didn't observe any wetland soils through that test pit. We actually installed a monitoring well. We monitored groundwater for an extended period of time, and we didn't find any redoxymorphic features. We didn't observe any other wetland soil. So that reinforced our conclusion that this really was an inclusion, and that there certainly was some upland area back here previously. Now, which brings us to our current application. So you can see here, there's a small wetland. So this is the limit of the wetland. So this is wet, this is wetland, this is an upland area, and then there's another small pocketed wetland here. This is essentially an irrigation pond, which was constructed as part of the operation of L&L Evergreen. And if you look through here, there's some piping in there where that was basically used as irrigation source for L&L Evergreen. And from a town line standpoint, you can see that area is roughly here, the majority of which is actually in Trumbull, but there is some in Monroe. We are proposing to impact that and basically expand upon that, which I'm going to go through. But I just want to say that we have received approval from the Trumbull Inland Wetlands Commission for this application, which includes the direct impact to this small wetland area here and the rest of the mitigation we're proposing as part of our application. So in addition to the history with 5 Victoria Drive, this property itself also has some history. And I think earlier this year, this commission may or may not remember that there was some activity towards the rear of this site which took place, and then there was a notice of violation, and a very simple plan was presented and approved to do some mitigation on this property here. And this kind of shows where the property line is. So this to this side is 5 Victoria Drive. To the left is the property by 7180. And you can see they were proposing some mitigation through here, but not actually going over their property line. So this was proposing to leave an upland here, upland through here, proposed some grading and some remediation area. But it really wasn't a good wholesale approach because it left this gap and it didn't really address both properties. So this work was commenced. It was not completed in accordance with the time frame. There wasn't subsequent follow-up by the applicant as part of that. And that was with another engineer, so we weren't involved in some of this stuff. We've since been brought on to kind of help get our arms around the whole thing, develop a good plan to address this from an overall standpoint, and that's why we're here this evening. So our proposal is we're proposing to fill the site, obviously with the current permitting process and things like that. A lot of these applications take a considerable amount of time to go through the process before we can get full approval to actually start site construction. So in an effort to prepare this site for future development, we've proposed a fill permit application to basically import material, rough grade the property to prepare it for future site development. And as part of this initial application, we wanted to address all of the wetland remediation and mitigation in this application, so that in the future, when we come in for a formal site plan application, all of the work and the activity towards the rear of the site will be done and addressed at this time, so that it'll be a little bit easier to bring through the process later. So this is the survey that we submitted, and this actually shows the limits of, so this is the current property line. Again, this is the rear portion of 5 Victoria Drive. This is 4 and 7182 Main Street. And we're proposing to modify this and essentially do a lot line revision to incorporate this portion of 5 Victoria Drive into 4 and 7182 Main Street. So this allows us to, and the current property owner provided their signature on the application, so all of these properties are all part of this current application. And ultimately, this conveyance will be merged with this property. So a lot of moving parts of this. It's somewhat complex and complicated, but I hope I did a good job of at least bringing you up to where we are now. So again, what we're proposing is to essentially get an approval to fill the site. We're proposing to import approximately 55,000 yards of material, and that's primarily to raise the grade of this property to be closer to the finished elevation of Route 25, if you're familiar with the area. What happens now is there's a driveway that drops down pretty considerably from Route 25. There's an existing building on the property back here. You can see a little bit better on the survey. Existing building here, it's kind of down in a hole. There are a number of tenants in that building, DSO Mechanical, there's a karate studio, Blue Line Firearms, I believe. So what we're proposing is to import material, demolish the existing building, and focus on wetland remediation towards the rear of the site and kind of clean up and address this area, this upland area, which was a potential wetland area in previous applications, to provide for some water quality measures and some stormwater management areas. At this point, it's been designed to provide sufficient capacity from a soil erosion sediment control standpoint to operate as a sediment basin. So we've proposed a larger forebay, including a spillway and then a subsequent basin as well with an additional spillway. Some of the other challenges that we have on the site is this rear portion of the property is located within a 100-year floodplain elevation. So what we did is we evaluated the floodplain in 2 different ways. The FEMA obviously establishes, they do hydraulic analysis and they prepare flood insurance maps which show the limits of the 100-year floodplain. And as part of that, they establish, if there's a hydraulic analysis done, they establish cross sections through these areas and they establish elevations for that 100-year floodplain. So they show it graphically on a line, but then they also assign it an elevation. So it's our job as engineers to, when we're doing a project through here, we have to look at both the horizontal line as shown on the FEMA map, but also the actual elevations in the field based on topographic conditions. So what you can see here is, it's a little bit hard to see. So this line here, if you follow the cursor, this is the location of the 100-year floodplain based on the FEMA map. And then this dashed line here, a little bit darker, is the 100-year floodplain based on the actual topographic contours on the property. So you can see, I mean, if you follow, this is the existing FEMA line that comes through here, and then it actually kind of takes a hard right. This is the horizontal location on the FEMA map itself. This is that same elevation based on actual contour data in the field. So they're generally consistent. But what we are proposing is we are proposing some excavation and some activity within the limit of that 100-year floodplain, both by horizontal line and also topographic line. One of our approaches was we wanted to make sure that we weren't proposing any fill within the floodplain. We didn't want to have any impact to the flood carrying capacity of the property. So what we proposed is only excavation within the 100-year floodplain. We're actually removing approximately 4,200 cubic yards of material within the regulated area, and none in the, and obviously no fill within the regulated floodplain. So we're actually lowering the area, lowering the elevation through here, increasing the flood carrying capacity, and considerably improving the condition from how it currently sits and how it's kind of been in the past, where it was kind of just used for storage and things like that. And from a mitigation standpoint, obviously, we recognize that there was prior disturbances, and we are proposing to fill, have a direct wetland impact to this small irrigation pond. So we are proposing additional mitigation as part of this application. We're basically establishing a 10-foot border around the entire wetland where that material would be removed, that elevation lowered, and that former fill material, or the fringes of what we believe was some fill material, to be removed and restored with additional wetland plantings. There's also a small access road which was left as part of Restoration Area E as a way to get in here and do this remediation. This will all be removed also as part of this application, and additional wetland plants restored in this area. So we'll be actually removing material and providing additional wetland plantings at this location here. You can see, you can actually see where the old wetland area was and where the new wetland delineation is, and we've actually, a lot of that wetland mitigation that has taken place, although it wasn't completed in the schedule that was what was allotted during the remediation, this actually has been expanded, additional material has been excavated out, and we're also looking to kind of fill in this area where previously it was off the property, so we had to come in and do additional remediation through there. So we're establishing this new edge of wetlands, and expanding the wetland mitigation throughout the overall property and considerably improving the upland area from how it currently exists. And again, we are not proposing any fill within the limits of the 100-year floodplain, only removing material and substantially improving the flood carrying capacity of the property. So this plan obviously shows our proposed grading, our proposed contours. This includes soil erosion sediment control measures, which have been prepared in accordance with the 2002 Soil Erosion Sediment Control Manual as provided by DEEP. Our design is also consistent with the parameters of the 2004 Water Quality Manual provided by DEEP in terms of stormwater management, and really this is going to be an active fill operation. And again, the whole purpose of this project is to enable and allow for the property owner to commence earthwork operations, to start the import of this 55,000 yards of material, to raise the grades, to really prepare it for future development. So in the immediate future, after this application, we would be bringing a formal site plan application to actually construct buildings in this area, which I'll show you. Included in this, we have a reclamation plan in accordance with the fill permit requirements. So this shows kind of the existing areas from a soil standpoint, and the proposed, so this is the proposed wetland area, this is the proposed wetland remediation area, mitigation area, and more closely shown on our wetland remediation plan, we're establishing the extensive wetland plans to be proposed in the remediation area all around the entire buffer, or all around the existing edge of wetland soils, through this small former access road here to really restore this entire area back to wetland soils and significantly improve the quality of that. And we do have a section which kind of shows how we would be excavating along the existing grade to kind of establish and restore some of this area. And actually, I will say, the owner did do some exploration back here and actually has already removed some material. I think the existing grade at this edge at the time of the application for 5 Victoria Drive was around 294. And some of that material has already been removed. So there actually has been some remediation that took place, granted without a permit, but obviously we're here now to kind of obviously to coordinate and clean up this area from a wetland standpoint. In accordance with the fill permit requirements, we provided the requisite sections. This kind of shows, this is a good section, section D, which is approximately here through the existing building. You can see where the existing building elevation is and what we're proposing from a grade standpoint and the amount of fill material we're proposing to raise this, to really prepare this site for future development. And then again, we do have, and again, here's another good example. This is section L, which is right through the center of the property. Through here, you can see the existing topography as it comes down, the existing building, and where our proposed grading is to really raise the site, improve and prepare the site for future development to accommodate a future development area. And I will say we do have a potential development plan, which we did submit. So the concept is to provide a multi-story facility, potentially a mixed-use facility, which would include retail and restaurant uses on the ground floor coming in off of Route 25, potentially residential uses above that. And then the site's been actually graded to capitalize on some of the existing grades where towards the rear of the site, this would serve as a ramp down, so you'd actually have a lower elevation, which could be used for some potential office use, which would kind of face the rear of the property. But this kind of utilizes the area to the best event, utilizes the existing site constraints to kind of maximize and establish some development opportunity for the property. So with me here is ask him to come up and he can kind of walk through his analysis from a wetland standpoint, talk about what he's observed from a functions and values and a wetland quality, and he was a big part of the preparation of the wetland remediation plan and the plant selections that we proposed as part of this, part of the remediation area along the wetland fringe. Good.
Good evening, everyone. Jim McManus, Certified Professional Soil Scientist with JMM Wetland Consulting Services with offices out of Newtown. Back on September 6th of this year, I delineated all the wetlands, found 3 separate areas that I labeled A, B, and C. Yeah, let's start there first. I'll just the map. Not that one. The one that has the development over the aerial.
Got it.
Right there. So I found 3. Kevin mentioned the first one, which is this isolated disturbed wetland. And then I call this one here is the B wetland, and then along this north, I guess that would be the northeast edge, is called the C wetland. The A wetland, as I just said, is a isolated, apparently it was a detention pond. If you look at some of the photographs, that's all right. The top picture, number 9, is actually this wetland. You can see there's escaped irises from the nursery, Japanese knotweed along the edges, tons of invasives in there. Now, of course, when we go to the other 2 wetlands, they're much better wetlands. Actually, they're quite good. We'll go through the functionality analysis in a minute, but those wetlands had some remediation done to them, but they are associated with a perennial watercourse, including a man-made pond that's off-site. And that includes the C series, which is also made, again, if you look at the photos, I know this is a little disjointed. Yes. There's another picture. 8 is that isolated wetland. There's 7. There's what the C wetland looks like. What you're looking at in the back is the man-made pond / watercourse. And here's another picture of C. There, 6 is just a typical profile of what the fill soils look like in and around the wetland that's being remediated. Photo 4 is the B series. You can see it's a mixture of scrub, shallow marsh, and wooded swamp along the edges. The picture above, number 3, is where they started to mitigate. It's hard to see, but right there is one of my new wetland flags. So I actually flagged this as a wetland now. So the wetland boundary actually expanded from previously. but all this material will be removed, and this area will be eventually mitigated. Again, that's the C-Series. Let's look at the functionality. If you look at my page 5, I have a little table there. The isolated disturbed wetland has no principal functions. It does have some functionality to it. Groundwater recharge, does trap sediment and toxins and things like that, nutrients. However, as you get away from that and get interior of the site, which is where the main wetlands are, you can see the principal functions go way up. And they're actually pretty nice wetlands, actually. And the good thing is we're not looking to disturb those at all. However, we do have one impact. It's that isolated wetland. We're actually going to fill it and then incorporate it into the stormwater and water quality basins, which will be replanted and things of that nature. So we're getting rid of a disturbed wetland and making a bigger one, if you will, which will be used as a dual function. We also looked at indirect impacts that deal with water quality and habitat. As it comes to erosion and sediment controls, obviously you saw from the filling plan that there are some steep slopes. The good thing is the area adjacent to the wetlands is already highly disturbed, and we're going to be working on that. And we have a robust soil and erosion control plan, so I'm not anticipating that. And also, part of that erosion control plan, we're going to have diversion berms and swales that's going to direct the runoff into the water quality basin will be used as a sedimentation basin during the filling process. So that's that wetland or that basin that's going to be built in, quote, the floodplain area. That's that upland spur. Which is this area here. Remember, this is going to be turned into a water quality basin. Well, during the filling part of this is going to be a sedimentation basin. Other things we look at is removal of native vegetation and habitat loss. Other than the isolated wetland, most of the trees are going to remain on site. So it's the majority of the site that's going to be disturbed. It's already open. So we're not going to have any or minimal tree or habitat loss. Potential wetland hydrology and stream flow, we're not touching any of those areas in the back, so we're not anticipating any hydrological or stream flow disruption. In our water quality, again, during the filling process, we do have the swales and the check dams and the large sedimentation basin being constructed with an outlet that will be discharged this way. So if there's any small release of sediment will go into this large wetland system and then turn around and then eventually hit the water course and the man-made pond. So it does have time to settle out if we do have a breach. Unlikely, but if we do, it won't be directed to the water course / pond directly. It will be skirted around. Just as a note, this right now is dominated by mugwort. So all my wetland boundaries followed an abrupt line, mainly along fill soils. So we're not anticipating any impacts to wetlands because the good wetlands, if you will, the high functioning wetlands are all going to be left alone. And the areas that have been disturbed around those high functioning wetlands are going to be mitigated for, fill pulled back, or all this disturbance in here and invasive species removed. All of the development's going to stay away from all that. Even during, once the filling is complete and the development comes in, all this will be left alone, and this here will just be, any sediment will be removed and then planted accordingly and used as a water quality and stormwater basin. So we're not anticipating any impacts to wetlands, and the direct impact that we do have is to really a non-functioning wetland that is going to be better utilized by getting rid of it and turning it into a water quality base.
Thanks, Jim. And just to kind of talk about some quantities. So as part of the previous wetland remediation application, which was approved and kind of started but not finished, as part of that work, it actually created an additional 1,848 square feet of wetlands that were observed on the property after that work was completed. So we've already created and increased the wetlands 1,848 square feet. In addition, this plan includes an additional 7,810 square feet of new wetland creation as part of this application to kind of deal with the analysis of the previous impact to wetland restoration area E, and also to address the proposed direct wetland disturbance for this small, man-made irrigation pond in this location here. And you can kind of expanding upon this and incorporating this entire area into this water quality sediment basin and future water quality basin. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from the commission. I think we've been working with staff, and we've had some back and forth with Denise. I think we've addressed the majority of her comments. There are still some comments that we're working through with Scott, the town engineer. We've addressed the majority of them. He does have some, very minor ones relating to our drainage analysis, because this site, again, has been designed so that this sedimentation basin can accommodate the 100-year storm event with additional freeboard. We are proposing to install the future outlet control structure for when this pond becomes a stormwater quality basin. However, this outlet control structure is essentially a catch basin with an inlet top, which would, once this is filled, it would overflow into that basin and then discharge towards the north. In future conditions, we'd want to make sure that this had an ability to drain out, so we are proposing to have a small knockout towards the bottom of this, in line with the existing bottom of pond. However, that would not be opened up until full site development, because we want this to operate as a sedimentation basin to make sure that there's adequate capacity for water, stormwater runoff during construction to come into this basin, settle out, and not have any sedimentation leaving the site into any of the resources on the property. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Okay. Commission members, if we have any questions?
Sorry,
Tim?
Madam Chair, thank you. Tim, I'll start with the simple ones. The wetland creation, is that basically in that 10-foot border area? Is that where your numbers are coming from?
It is. So it's in the 10-foot buffer area surrounding. It includes the removal of this former access road, which again was kind of placed, and then it's around the perimeter through here.
Okay. And then you said, I think you stated, but in the application definitely says that is going to be considered wetlands when you get done, right? The 10-foot border.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
The question is your upland area calculated from that new area, or is that incorporated into your, as far as construction of the parking lot and stuff like that? Is there any other issues there? In other words, once that is now wetlands, does your upland review area extend back from that?
It would, yes. No, that's a great point. Once, in terms of the future application, depending on, it'll depend on the timing,
Sure.
right? I mean, ideally, we would come in with the future application while this work is still underway. But once this work is completed, if another application were to come in and that wetland to be established, that would be the new edge of wetlands, and our upland review area would essentially
Gotcha.
be enlarged.
That's very, I'm glad for that answer.
Yes.
In other words, the future application with the parking lot may look now like it might encroach, because we don't actually know what that
Well,
process
obviously, so the upland area is a 100-foot buffer, right?
Right,
So
yep.
we're obviously proposing activity here. In the future, there very well may be some additional work within the regulated area, and we will obviously come back before the commission for a
Okay,
formal application.
Thank you for that. So then my other question, and I know we've been down this road on other projects in town, so I'm not suggesting it's not possible. I just want to hear your explanation. So you have multiple owners on this property.
Yes.
The original application was signed by both owners, is that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
There's actually, because there's 3 different properties.
Right.
One entity owns these 2 pieces, another entity owns the portion of 5 Victoria Drive, which is going to be merged into the site. Yes, so all of the interested parties were a part of the application.
And the tricky area that we're talking about now is definitely involved in that,
Correct.
right? So how does, in your view, how does this application bear on that other owner should the transfer not actually take place?
Well, this application will essentially solidify and establish the remediation requirements associated with that former violation. So this addresses kind of closing out the wetlands permit that was issued for 5 Victoria Drive. You know, this would, the $30,000 bond that's been posted, there would be a new bond posted by this new property owner prior to the lot line revision taking place. So there's always that mechanism in there, but with this approval, that establishes what those remediation requirements are to fully close out that permit.
And in your view, is that is equally bearing on the other owner should this transfer never take place, or not?
Yes, yeah, I believe so. I think, you know, if the only scenario I could envision where the transfer wouldn't take place is if this application isn't approved in its current form, or for whatever reason the current applicant doesn't elect to move forward with that project. I can assure you that, you know, that property owner is excited about redeveloping the property and improving it, you know, or we wouldn't be here.
Right. And I expect it probably will happen that way, but my only point would be, if this is granted in this fashion and it doesn't take place, does the other property owner have the right to proceed with some other scheme without having to readdress this? In your view?
I think it's somewhat of a tricky question. I think the other property owner would have the ability to perform the work as identified on this permit if they so chose to do that. However, if they wanted to come in with a different application, that would certainly be within their rights.
Sure, okay, understood. My last question then goes to timing. So obviously, you're not filling prior to this transfer having been taken place.
That's correct.
Right? And do you think that the timing of the process and any extensions will cover any time frame? You know, it's hard to tell how long it's going to take to get through the process, but
So
in your view.
the transfer of the land itself, the lot line revision plan has been reviewed by both the town of Monroe staff and the town of Trumbull staff. That plan is in its final form. That plan has been signed by both property owners. However, it hasn't been filed yet because they wanted to see how this process went.
Right. Is there a mechanism in your view that you can have this permit is subject to the transfer? Or is that-
The commission could certainly include as a condition of approval that the formal lot line revision map be filed.
Okay.
Yeah, so that could be a condition of approval for this
That would essentially
application,
make
that
it
map get
subject to
filed.
the
Correct.
transaction.
So that would essentially mean that before this wetland permit, assuming this commission deems it favorable, before that permit could be filed on the land records, that
Right.
transfer would have to take place.
Okay. I guess I did a couple more. You made a comment about no filling would be done within the floodplain.
Correct.
And this is more for clarification. I know the answer, and you did explain this, but there will be filling within the upland review area as far as this, that one more
That's correct.
distressed area is concerned.
There's approximately 86 cubic yards of fill to be placed within the regulated area,
Right.
but none of that is within the 100-year
Correct.
floodplain. The majority of the fill takes place outside the regulated area, but there is about 86 yards within the limits of the regulated area.
How many yards are there in a dump truck?
10 to
So you're
12.
talking about 7 or 8 or 9 truckloads of fill.
Right.
That you're going to gather as clean, certified, or
Of course.
knowledgeable.
Of course, and as part of this process, as we go through the planning and zoning process,
Right.
there's a number of provisions and conditions that are going to be put on here. Any and all material brought onto the site needs to be certified and deemed clean in
Sure.
accordance with DEP's
As far as
requirements.
this commission is concerned, we're talking about a handful of truckloads.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Anybody else? Jim?
Yeah, the fill you're bringing in, can you explain what it's gonna be?
Sure, so so this application is actually somewhat in concert with another application that involves the same property owner who owns land across the street on Route 25. So we currently have 2 applications pending before Planning and Zoning, a fill permit application for these properties, and an excavation permit application for 7 and 15 Main Street, which is on the, we have a property owner or property owners who are looking to invest in the community, create some of these, potential mixed-use development, a considerable investment in the town. And they're essentially to this side of 25, as you guys drive down the road, you look to the right, it's down a hill. You look to the left, it's up a hill. So we have an application pending with Planning and Zoning to excavate this side of the road to prepare that site for future site development. And essentially, the majority of that material will come across the road here. So it's really a balancing act where the property owner, the applicant, has 2 pieces, one with extra material and one that needs material. So it really is a balance and a blend between the 2. And that's why both the applications are kind of going through the process at the same time.
So you're not proposing to bring any spoils in or recycled material or anything?
No.
Anything like that?
No. A lot of the material through here will be excavated and essentially trucked across the street and brought through here. And we're actively working on, we're working with the Planning and Zoning Commission as we go through that application in terms of how that's going to take place and the timing associated with it.
Okay, your current, or your proposed pond,
Yes.
they're gonna become detention ponds, obviously, in the future, correct?
Yes.
How do they work in a 100-year storm when they're gonna be underwater by 4 or 5 feet of water?
So in terms of during a, well,
100-year storm.
so this area won't be, the area and the volume established in these basins is not enough to accommodate the full detention and attenuation required for full future development. So our future development application will include underground detention within the parking area, which will outlet into this additional water quality basin. So this is something that we've incorporated that into the analysis. From 100-year floodplain elevation, what happens is, from an analysis standpoint, when you look at where we are in the watershed, we're in the very lowest reaches of the West Pequannock watershed, and actually, so from a time standpoint, the volume and the water that comes through this site will leave this site well before that overall flood volume kind of comes through the overall corridor. So if you look at the kind of like the, and it's escaping me right now,
Time of concentration.
well, it's not the time of concentration. It's actually where the hydrographs, where the peaks
Yeah.
are. We are so far in the front of that storm event that a lot of that will happen, kind of take place before. So from a stormwater standpoint, yes, if that takes place, but all of the water through here will kind of be in and out. So even through that, again, from a 100-year storm event, that's part of our analysis.
Okay, so you've taken into account the fact that this may be underwater.
Yes, and that was something that we had to do also when we did it part of 5 Victoria, because even here, we have our detention basin down in this area here. That's something we have to analyze and look
Okay.
at.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Excuse me.
No, they already asked.
Okay. If you come up with any in the meantime, feel free to cut me off.
Let's see where I start.
Could you please go into a little bit more detail on your conceptual future plan?
Sure. So we're proposing to raise the elevation of the site so that, we're still going to be lower than Main Street, but you would come in off of Main Street. You would have a development at grade with commercial, retail, restaurant uses, and then potentially above that, we've been actively in discussions with the Regulation Subcommittee and the Planning and Zoning Commission about incorporating mixed use for some multifamily apartments above that elevation of retail and commercial restaurant spaces. So this would all be at grade when you come in with an additional story above, and then towards the rear and along here, these would act as kind of ramps down. So we would have a small portion of the site which would be at a lower elevation, still above the edge of wetlands, but this would be, you know, a lower elevation. So kind of right through here, there'd be a lower elevation which faces the rear. Another, the second story would be at grade facing this direction, and then residential above that. And that's only for a very small portion through here. So through this area, you know, to the east of this parking area, and this is a conceptual plan, it's still kind of being refined based on the outcome of our ongoing discussions with planning and zoning. But this is the area of that water quality basin that we're establishing, and then we probably have additional underground detention, as I stated, kind of through this area here to make sure we were accommodating our overall stormwater increase as part of the change in the development.
Could this happen, excuse me, could this still happen if you did not get the regs for mixed use?
Well, this development could happen, certainly. It just wouldn't have the multifamily component.
Okay. So potentially if it did not happen and there were not residential apartments added to it, you could reduce the parking by a whole lot. Am I correct?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. Where would the virgin soils be for a septic system?
So that's another interesting component. This site is actually both in the town of Monroe and the town of Trumbull. The town of Trumbull has already agreed to extend the sewer to service this property, which makes this property very unique, as it would only be one of two pieces that are actually in both communities and connected to the Trumbull sewer system.
And they would do the whole development?
Yes, yes, and that's why it would, you know, the building itself, again, the town line, which isn't terribly clear on here, kind of runs through here. So the majority of the building is actually in, or a good portion of the building is in Trumbull, which would allow that sewer connection to take place.
Good to know. How does the tax situation happen when you've got a divided plot? I mean, I know this has nothing to do with us, but it's just something I'm curious about.
Each municipality taxes the improvements in their community. So essentially,
So if that side was in Trumbull, then Trumbull gets all the good stuff and we get all the parking? I mean, really?
there's a good amount of this property in this project that's in the town of Monroe. So it's mutually beneficial to both communities.
Trumbull and 1/4 of Monroe.
And you know what would improve that? Let's get some sewers in the town of Monroe.
Good luck. Been there, done that. Let me see. Okay, there is, you can go back, back to that picture. If you look in the upper northeast section of that, of 5 Victoria.
Yep.
Northeast, not the southeast, of the proposed additional plot to be added to the property.
In here,
I'll keep going to the left. There, right there.
yes.
Right underneath there is another road that cuts right through the wetland.
So that was removed as part
That has
of,
been
it has been removed. You can
It still
actually,
shows up in all the aerials, but that is,
There is one, but it's still on Victoria, but the one by the wetlands has been removed.
so, yeah, this has been removed.
Oh,
D,
okay.
I think D's remediation?
Yes, so there were actually, and you can see it, let me go back to the, some of the earlier
There's like a little
slides.
piece or something, but,
I actually flagged out an upland area that we're gonna.
and it's on this
So-
side of the property.
Exactly, so this remediation area was essentially supposed to come all the way to the property line. There's maybe a tiny bit right here, which is gonna be removed as part of this application, but the balance of this was removed
Okay.
as part of the remediation of restoration area D. And then again, this finger here is gonna be removed as part of this application.
right, understood.
The other road doesn't.
Since we don't have to worry about septic systems, I'm back on the proposed concept. Would more underground detention eliminate the need for a future detention basin?
It would potentially, certainly,
Could
but
that be considered an alternative?
we've considered an alternative. We've looked at it. Obviously, the state statutes have a requirement to look at alternatives. We did submit as part of our application some potential alternatives. That is something that we've considered. But we also wanted to look at this from a practical standpoint, and we have that is landlocked from its current property owner, which creates no real value, has impacts, which needs to be remediated. But we wanted to try to create a mechanism and a vehicle to ensure that remediation takes place.
Well, pardon me if I don't consider a sedimentation basin a remediation. Remediation is a different a different definition altogether, and mitigation is slightly different than
So,
that.
so sedimentation basin, I would agree with you. But the long-term plan for this is to create a water quality basin, which is going to provide considerable improvement and additional habitat from what's out there today. If you were to visit the site today, that area has been disturbed, it was used for storage. You can even see it on some of the older aerials, you know, how L&L Evergreen used it. I mean, there were trucks and vans back here, there was just plant materials, they had brought in like, 3/8 stone and kind of created all these pathways and things like that. So this needs to get remediated. Obviously, the current owner, you know, there's not much they can use it for. So this lot line revision and this conveyance of the land really creates the vehicle for this entire area to get improved from its current condition. So while, yes, there is a potential, but we wanted to make sure that what happened here was robust and it was gonna provide, you know, a considerable improvement than what's out there today. And this is kind of the vehicle to make that happen. And again, I mean, we do have, you know, this area is, during the fill permit operation, it would be used as a sediment basin. But as part of our future site plan application, this sediment would be removed, and then this basin itself would have some additional plantings proposed.
And as I mentioned, if you were to go out there now, about 90% of that upland strip that we're going to dig down and build those basins is mudwort, which you know is a pretty aggressive invasive. It's taken over.
As long as you're at the microphone, Mr. McManus, let me ask you some questions.
Sure.
What is the purpose, from a natural outlook, what is the purpose of an upland that surrounds a wetland? What is its function? What is its value in relation to the wetland?
It's a good question. No one actually asked that before.
Give it to me.
And it has a lot of functions. Uplands, 75% of Connecticut is considered an upland on average, and 25% is wetlands. Well, that's where we live, that's where a lot of plants live, that's where a lot of animals live. And I always call wetlands the liver and the kidneys of the earth. Everything that flows off of the uplands goes into the wetlands, theoretically cleans it, brings it back to background levels by the time it reaches our rivers, lakes, ponds, and eventually the ocean. So, but what are you getting
How
at?
important is it to keep a healthy upland in order to keep a healthy wetland?
It's very important. If you disturb your upland, your wetland will probably be disturbed as well eventually. However, on this situation, our upland that are adjacent to wetlands is very disturbed. The interior of our wetlands are very high quality. We're not touching the interior. We're touching the exterior. And we're cutting out and I couldn't tell, I wasn't there for the test pits. I don't know if that spur, this area here, is fill or upland or both, or natural soils or both. I can only tell you my wetland boundary followed along an abrupt boundary. You don't have to know anything about wetlands to flag this one. You just go to the edge and go boom, flag. And it was covered in mugwort, and I knew for a long time it was used as nursery products, as you can see from the old aerials. And I noticed too, if you go back into the past.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah, but
ask you that.
but that's a true statement, but you have to look at every site as its own world, and how can we protect the on-site and off-site wetlands. Your upland in this particular site has been butchered for decades. The wetlands are being brought back to life from not just us, but various other folks. The Swiss Army folks, 5 Victoria Drive, that's the soccer folks. I mean, the wetland I call Wetland B has been worked upon by Mother Nature and by man, and it's winning right now.
Okay. In your assessment chart, when you talk about wetland A, you said it has wildlife habitat. What's living in there?
Don't know, it has, if you look at the wetland, you would have to say, if you were looking at a function of value, it does have some wildlife habitat. I'm sure there's frogs in there.
So you
Birds
didn't
land on the
identify-
tree.
I mean, since it's an isolated pond.
It's not a vernal pool.
Because it'd be,
No, it doesn't have the water, it doesn't have the hydrology, hydroperiod. It's just a dumpy hole in the ground for a nice scientific word.
is it degraded and
Yes.
non-functional or low functioning?
It's low functioning.
Because you don't say that anywhere in your report. The only thing you do say is that it's disturbed throughout.
It's disturbed throughout, and it has no principal functions with a few minimal functions. To me, it's low quality. And since we're building something, we're filling it to build something better around it, which is still going to be used. Maybe technically a pseudo-wetland, since it's a 100-year floodplain kind of a thing, but it's still going to be vegetated with natural vegetation, and it's going to be planted in and around it with natural vegetation, which is not there today.
Okay. I think that's all I had for you. Something you said disturbed me a little bit, and that is that the overflow from the detention basin will be directed toward the wetland, in which case it will go directly into the wetland because it's so close. Am I correct in what I heard?
So as with every detention basin, you always want to make sure you have an outlet control structure so that it gets directed in a certain place, and then that outlet control is established in accordance with standard engineering methodology. So we do
Isn't it usually
have,
directed more toward an upland though, so that it has a little bit more
Well-
cleaning time before it hits the wetland?
well, the beauty of an application like this and redevelopment like this is the stormwater, is going to have additional, this basin isn't being used as a water quality basin in terms of providing water quality. We're going to have, upgrading from this, we're going to have hydrodynamic separators and vortechnic units to clean the water prior to discharge into the underground detention system. So that water is going to be essentially cleaned when it goes underground. And then when it comes out of that underground, it's going to be clean as it comes into this basin. This basin is going to have additional plantings. And then so the water that would eventually come out of this structure would be clean and then would discharge into, or discharge to a level spreader to ensure that that water doesn't create any rills or erosion or things like that, and that is discharged into the overall wetland. And again, we wanted to bring it to the north to give that even more time to take its circuitous path to its ultimate destination for the west bank of the Pequannock.
What happens if you outlet it to the south?
So the south is the Trumbull landfill, and I'm not interested.
Directly next to it?
Oh, directly next to it, actually, and part of our analysis from 5 Victoria was there's actually, it almost seems as the town of Trumbull kind of maybe went a little bit too far over their property line, which wouldn't be terribly surprising. But this entire area is all Trumbull landfill. So I wouldn't want to introduce stormwater discharge into that when I don't know what's there, right? I'd rather put it to the north, which would then obviously get through and get back into the Pequannock, rather than introduce any additional, stormwater discharge or runoff into this, which again is, it's been a landfill for a long time. There was the rail trail.
I said, it just doesn't look like a landfill. It looks just like the property next to it.
Well, I think that what happens over time, but that was definitely a landfill for a lot of years. And actually, you can see that the former rail bed, obviously the rail trail now, and I don't know if I have another aerial that goes a little bit further back. Let's see if I have something. Here we go. So I don't. Can't see it here. So the rail trail, the former rail bed actually used to come straight across Victoria Drive, through Vichy-Vitremont, through this area, and continued this way. When they did the rail trail, they actually kind of redirected it at Victoria Drive, brought it back up across and through Victoria Drive. This is a bit of an older picture. But you can see it here. So rather than kind of continuing where its former location was up here, they actually redirected it as part of this and then brought it to the opposite side of the Pequannock.
Right.
But at one point, you can almost see it right here. This was rail bed at one point, and then it became landfill. Yeah, so all through here.
Interesting. I guess it is.
Why not dump right next to the
Learn something
river?
new every day. how close is your future development rendering to what you're actually planning on proposing?
So one of the things that we wanted to make sure we were working on was where our toe of slope is going to be. And obviously where the location of that floodplain is, that's really our controlling factor, right? So our proposed toe of slope is essentially kind of right along here. So we're not proposing even in the future condition to do anything within this limit of the 100-year floodplain. So the rear of our site is essentially kind of through here. We have a little bit of a parking that may come out, well, to here. But obviously the limits of the basin are proposed to be maintained in future in perpetuity, and then kind of come through here. So we're not looking to come, you know, kind of really beyond this limit in terms of a future development footprint. So we want to establish our toe of slope now so that we're not going to having any further disturbance in the future.
How much of that upland review area is going to have fill in it?
So,
as slope?
So, again, we've only got about 86 cubic yards of fill within the regulated area, so very little.
All of that slope is not in regulated area?
Well, a lot of this is actually cut. So part of what we're doing is when this is the limit of the 100-year floodplain. So as part of that remediation, they expanded where this floodplain was. This was the line from the FEMA map, and this is the current line from contour data. So
Which FEMA map, what year?
the most recent.
How about, if you went back to the original, that original pictorial you put up there?
Yeah.
The very first one, like 150 years ago? Seems like 150 years ago. Keep going. The one where you
This one.
said that one?
Yes. So
Would the FEMA map be the same on that map as it is today?
So there was a study done in, I believe it was, there was a FEMA map established in 1984, right? There was a hydraulic analysis done for the town of Monroe in 1984, which established, or no, it was actually before then. No, it was 84. 84, which established a FEMA line. That hydraulic analysis was updated in 1989, right? I don't know what the difference in between those lines were from 84 to 89, but we have reviewed some contour data from 1988, which was before the 89 update. I'll say some of those contours are not, they don't seem consistent from a horizontal standpoint, from a floodplain standpoint. Those contours were showing elevations that varied by about 8 feet from what was in the FEMA study. So it's hard to look at the 88 contour data and the FEMA line and the 89 analysis and really kind of marry those two, which again was why we wanted to make sure we looked at this as, we don't want to put any fill in the floodplain. We don't want to have to go from an analysis standpoint. We want to make this application so that all we're doing is increasing the flood carrying capacity on the property. In terms of the difference, I think just based on this, and you can kind of see, this is a great picture to show the landfill, actually, right? So it was ongoing, and you can definitely see, again, before any of the work with LNL Evergreen, there is a clear delineation through here, through pictures, kind of along this edge versus where it was. And that's generally consistent with, you can see it again here, but it's generally consistent with where we are from a wetland line standpoint. That's again why when we went back and did test holes, you know, based on the soil profile that we saw, we didn't see wetland soils. We didn't see that organic matter. We didn't see redoxamorphic features. That's why when we were working on this, we kind of came to the conclusion that this really was just an inclusion. And then as we looked at it again and understanding where the floodplain was, again, we didn't want to go down that path of looking at, well, if we place some fill, how do we provide compensatory storage? Knowing the history, we said, let's just only increase at this point, so it's a little bit easier to handle from a permitting standpoint.
Does any of the commissioners have any other questions?
I just have one
Sure.
quick one. I just want to make sure that the applicant was aware that we have this presentation that was made at Town of Trumbull, this report.
Yes.
Yeah, so in here, just for the record, so we can discuss it later and if we wish, but in here, there's a fairly good description of A1A, you know, what you found in that particular zone. If you wanted to read it into the record, or if not, I'd just comment that.
That same
it's quite
report was
descriptive.
submitted to the town of Monroe.
Okay.
Yes, I think it was
Town
actually,
of Trumbull, but
no,
it's fine, that's fine.
it was submitted to the town of Monroe as well. It was an appendice of our overall
Well,
engineering
The
report.
reason I bring it up is because he had said, you know, he may not have covered that in the detail that he felt. That's very descriptive of
He
that.
did. He does a good
That's
job.
all, yeah.
Well, I'm hoping everybody has my report because
Yeah.
each town got exactly the same
Yes.
report.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
Just didn't change the town of Trumbull to the town of
I
Monroe,
I
that's all.
changed it
That's
to
what was
Monroe.
confusing.
I hope I
All
did.
right. On the one that we
Not on
did,
Well,
it's absolutely
But
fine.
that's okay, it's the
You
same
know
report,
what it
so
is,
it's fine.
there were two, in that appendix, so one letter might have been, so what I
Yeah.
copied
yes,
was,
Non-issue.
right,
my,
it would, my copying instead of
For
Jim's
sake of good order, I
work.
just want to make
Jim's
sure
work was
everybody was on the
Yes.
same page, that's all.
yes, for the record, I do have a town of Trumbull in the Wetlands Commission. But it's exactly the same report.
Right.
I
Yes,
apologize, I
word
do have
different.
a
Yes.
follow-up question on that, though. All right, so Kevin, where does this stand with Trumbull? I think
We've been
that you
approved.
said that it was. approved,
Yes, we
right?
received approval, I think, last Tuesday, or possibly, yeah, last Tuesday, we were approved by the Trumbull and Wetlands Commission.
Excellent, okay. That's all, thank you.
and just for the record, here is a copy of the legal notice, including the clippings of when it was
Posted.
published, yes.
Okay, would you like to read the exhibits into the record, please? Oh, but before we do that,
Yeah.
have all your comments been addressed as our agent?
No, there were a couple questions that were just sent to them recently that we haven't talked about.
Okay, would you like to put it in the record?
Yep. Just give me 1 second. Although I think some might have been, one of them might have been addressed a little bit more this evening. Let's see, this is. We talked about the pending, so that's kind of been answered now. When you talked about the remediation of the accessway, I think you touched on it tonight. On the plan, it just said to be remediated, but in the presentation, you did say that the fill material for that accessway, that piece that's going towards 5 Victoria, was going to be removed as well.
Yes, so that would actually be excavated down to the natural elevation of the wetlands on either side of that road, and then we are proposing some plantings through there, and provide, what those plants are based on our coordination with
Yeah,
Jim.
the note had just said it would be remediated. I saw the plantings, but it didn't say that the fill was going to be removed. That's why I was
Yes,
questioning.
yes,
that.
we would be removing that material all the way down to the natural grades on either side of that road.
Just so you know, I was at 5 Victoria recently for monitoring report that they owed us, and so I was walking from the opposite side. So that's why I knew that there was fill there.
Yeah, yeah, and we did, I think we submitted that report actually
Yeah.
recently. Yeah, so, and it does look great.
It does.
It's an improvement.
There-
There are some things we still have to,
There's a couple things that I
Yeah.
saw and have to be kind of taken care of, but.
Mhm.
Further on, you talk about, the remediation being done. The original remediation, it was before you.
yes.
Remediation was being done, it wasn't completed. Now, sometimes I hear it say that it has been done, but it hasn't been done.
So the details as outlined on the plan that was approved by this commission, which is basic,
Right,
the excavation took place. The
And it was
plantings
further, right.
and the full establishment of those as wetland areas was not completed. And basically when we were involved, we said, well, I don't want you to go plant plants in that area because we need to look at this whole area as a whole. So essentially what we're requesting is that this application essentially kind of supersede and take the place of that previous wetland violation approval, so that everything associated with this application kind of usurps that, takes over. So while from a delineation standpoint, because fill material was removed, the soils that exist meet the definition of a wetland soil. But it is not, a finished wetland soil in that it has additional plantings placed and things like that. And you can kind of see that from some of
I
some of
have-
Jim's pictures.
Right, I have some photos too. I don't know the time frame between when I went. I could see Jim's, I could see, yeah, I could see your stakes. I could see the property line stakes
Yep.
down at the hole,
Yeah,
you know, with the water.
So-
Well, they dug enough out
Yeah,
that now it's a wetland.
well, they're to the wetland soils, that's the thing.
Wetland soil, so,
So by Connecticut definition, it's now a wetland.
Right.
It was a wetland, it was filled, now it's
Right.
non-filled, now
Right.
it's a wetland again. We just haven't finished.
okay.
Right,
The
and
job.
that's part of what we've outlined here
Yeah.
on our
Right.
remediation plan in terms of where that wetland edge is gonna be and what we're
Like,
planting
it's
in
like,
there.
sometimes it's semantics, because it's like, it
Yeah.
wasn't done, it was done.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get that clarified a little bit.
In picture 3, I'd call that a rough grade right
Right.
now. And that needs to be, the
So,
rest of the fill taken out, established, planted,
Mm-hmm.
completed.
so what activity is going on now that I see the trucks and the backhoe and all that stuff that's going on? Is that the excavation that he's not supposed to be doing?
So it was, well, first of all, a lot of that activity stopped, right? There was activity ongoing kind of throughout the summer where it was kind of
About a
tied to
week
this.
ago, there was
And I think,
still a-
and one of the things that was found is they started to do this work. And they
That's-
started to expose this, they started to find all kinds of stuff going much further back than they anticipated. That's why the area of excavation grew, because they found all kinds of stuff that wasn't supposed to be
They're
there.
working way behind the building towards the dump.
So there's been material that's been stockpiled there, and part of this is part of this overall application is to address the fact that there was activity, but we need to kind of get all that cleaned up so that they can move forward under valid permits to do this work, to remove some of those stockpiles, obviously, to do all that stuff. I mean, when they started getting in here, it's amazing what L&L Evergreen did. I mean, they essentially found like a house back here.
Yeah,
That was
no, I
just-
saw a lot of the,
Yeah, and a lot of that debris and tires and things like that, so a lot of that stuff actually has come out, which kind of when they started to do the remediation, all of a sudden they realized they had a lot more to chase, and it kind of,
but I saw a lot of the activity more behind the building. So if we're,
back here.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were way back there, and there was a lot of truck activity, a lot of backhoes moving material. Now, saw this when I was at 5 Victoria, so I
So
don't
this was
know.
very recent?
Yes,
Okay, well, I can certainly, I'm not totally aware of what exactly was going on, but
I'm
we can
just
certainly,
wondering, I mean, they
address
shouldn't
it,
really
yeah.
be doing any work out there,
absolutely,
and there was a lot going on.
yeah.
Okay, then, let's see. Bill, the PCP plan helps, and let's see. Okay, we've kind of,
What is your timeline for your remediation?
So our first step is this approval. We got approval from Wetlands. We're in the process of going through these applications with planning and zoning. We think we're next on the agenda for next Thursday, or it may have actually been, just because of the timing, it may be the first month of January, but they want to start doing this work. A lot of the excavation across the street is going to happen over the winter, but they want to start this work immediately, once the weather breaks.
These are two separate issues.
They are.
The filling is one thing, the remediation is quite another.
You're absolutely right. So obviously, with any of these applications, I think from a statute standpoint, the timing is one thing. But is the applicant's intent to get this approval, and then as soon as the weather allows, them to start this work in the spring?
Okay, how about completion date?
We don't have one. We could certainly talk through one if the commission would like to establish one.
I think we would. I don't know what the commission feels. Obviously, you need some good weather and you need some planting time.
I mean, I'll say from an earthwork operation standpoint, the first thing they got to do is deal with the back. They have to prepare the sediment basin so that it can actually receive the stormwater discharge during construction. So that's going to be one of the first things that they do.
Which is really not related to the remediation itself, because
Well-
you could pull back that 10 feet very easily, use that soil for something, and the edges behind the property could be easily remediated without having anything to do with the sedimentation basin.
I simply meant it because, I meant that because it's going to be one of the first things they do. Because they're going to want to start on the edge, they're going to want to do this first, and then get this ready, and then start the fill operation, from a sequence standpoint.
As you know, there's going to be no planting until the spring at the
Oh,
earliest.
obviously.
Yes. So we don't want to expose too much right away. without it not being able to be stabilized other than with silt fence, straw, mulch, or things like that. So I don't know their plans, but for me, for the mitigation or the enhancement areas, I'd like to see them, I like to have it go in concert. You pull everything out, and you come in, finish the mitigation, plant it, and let it grow. So by the time September hits, we actually almost have a whole growing season under our belts.
So you're saying that we could have it finished, completed with plants and et cetera, the whole enchilada by midsummer? Am I hearing that?
I mean, I would think from a timing standpoint, from a planting standpoint, the optimal planting season for some of these things is either in the early spring or is really that period between September 15th and October 15th. So I think, well, if it would please the commission, if we could have that October 15th date to have the remediation completed, I think that would be something that would work well into the overall schedule and establish that hard date that isn't 5 years out, but it's within that peak time to make these plants be installed at a time where they're going to be able to thrive and be vibrant.
As long as it's understood that it is not linked to the timing of the not construction, but
Right, the overall.
filling, the overall permit.
Yeah.
Right.
Remediation permit is a completely separate entity.
Agreed.
And that if the remediation is not completed in time, it could nullify the permit itself.
Yeah.
That's understood.
Understood, and I think if the commission would be okay with October 15th, that would be a perfect time, because then that allows that to happen in that key planting season. It's funny, when they did 5 Victoria, they ended up planting in August, and the owner spent so much time trying to water those plants to keep everything, because it just, from a growing season standpoint and a timing standpoint, it just doesn't work all the time. I remember he was out there on like a Saturday, and his daughter, him and his daughter were like taking turns watering those plants. So I think it's all about the timing.
Okay, we can discuss that in deliberations. Thank you. One of those. Okay. Any other commission questions? Donna, you're on.
Okay. So, reading exhibits, Exhibit 1 was a timeline of approvals and deadlines. Exhibit 2 were inland wetland agent comments, document dated September 27th, 2019 by Denise Halstead. Exhibit 3 were town engineer comments by Scott Schatzline, dated October 3rd, 2019. Exhibit 4 was updated engineering comments by Scott Schatzline, document dated October 3rd, revision date October 18th. 5 was a time extension letter granting the delay of the opening of the hearing to December 11th by Solely Engineering, and the document was dated November 13th. Exhibit 6 was a CD of the updated revisions, new map and report submissions by Solely Engineering. The document was dated December 3rd. Exhibit 7 was an updated engineering report by Solely Engineering. The document was dated November 25th. The revision date was November 27th, 2019. Exhibit 8 was a map set. It was an updated plan set titled Excavation Filling Permit Application by Solely Engineering. The document was dated September 23rd, revision date November 27th, 2019. Exhibit 9 was a response to comments by Solely Engineering dated December 3rd, 2019. Exhibit 10 was updated town engineer comments by Scott Schatzline, dated 12/6/19, and Exhibit 11 was inland wetland agent updated comments by Denise Halstead. The document was dated September 27th, revision date December 5th. And that's all of our exhibits.
Okay. I'm going to open this to the public. Do I have any members present that would like to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, do I have any that are opposed to this application? Seeing none, have I have comments of general nature or questions? Seeing none. If there's any more commission questions? Okay, applicant, final statement?
No, I think, what we've I think we have an opportunity here to kind of address an area that really needs to be remediated. And again, we wanted to take the approach, and we kind of pushed, knowing, working for this applicant and then knowing the other issue with the other property, we thought this was a great opportunity to kind of address this from an overall standpoint, really create a mechanism and a vehicle to really improve an area that really needs remediation and actually bring it to the forefront sooner rather than later. So I think what we've done is in accordance with the wetland regulations, the planning and zoning regulations, and we respectfully request approval.
Okay. Then I,
You want a motion to
we'll move to close the hearing, do we?
close the hearing?
We don't usually have one,
Well,
but we can do
Yeah,
it.
go ahead.
I move that we close the public hearing and schedule
Second.
for deliberation at a time to be determined by the chair.
Okay. Do I hear a
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? So moved.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to save this presentation on the computer.
Yep, that's fine, thanks. Thanks.
No. Before, we're gonna take a 5-minute recess for a break, and I just wanna make sure it's on the record, I forgot to mention it, that Lois Spence is also the vice chairman of the commission. I missed that in the beginning, so I wanna make sure we had that. All right, 5-minute recess.
Didn't you just have a recess?
Just, okay. Good Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located at 501 Main Street here in Monroe. Here tonight on behalf of Rockhead LLC, who is the new property owner at 64 Cambridge and 4 Independence Drive. With me here this evening is Arnold Karp and Paul Stone, representing the property owner, and also attorney Steve Finn, who's our legal counsel. He's going to get up and say a few words, and then I just kind of want to bring the commission through some history. Obviously, the notice of violation was extensive, had a lot of claims in it, a lot of which will require some time to fully analyze and assess, but I am going to want to go through just some of the history to kind of clarify some of the items that were in that as we kind of go through this process. So with that.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Steve Finn. I'm an attorney with the firm of Wofsy Rosen, Kweskin and Kiriansky. I am here representing Astro Land Holdings, LLC. I think Kevin misspoke when he said Rockhead 25. The notice of violation was issued to Astro Land Holdings, LLC. My client purchased this property 6 months ago in May of 2019. My client did not create any of the issues that are set forth in the notice of violation. All those issues happened many, many years ago before my client ever purchased this property. Since my client has purchased this property, he has done a lot to try to clean up the property and work towards making this a functional property that will benefit the town of Monroe. And in fact, indicative of my client's sensibility to environmental issues, he has been working towards cleaning up the property as best he can. And it is fully his intent to try to address all these issues, regardless of the fact that he did not create, or that Astro Land Holdings did not create any of them. It is rather curious that these problems have existed for decades. In fact, if you look at the notice of violation that was issued and the violation background report, that the dates set forth in this document go back to 2004, 2006, 2014, 2009, 2012, 2015. Again, my client bought this property 6 months ago in May of 2019. Now, having said all that, as I start off, just I said a moment ago, it is my client's intent to try to address all these concerns. He bought this property to develop it, not to have it sit and fester. He's here to try to work with the town of Monroe to make this a functioning property, which I think everyone can agree is what is the paramount goal for this property. But having said that, let me start. And in doing that, and trying to make this a functioning property that is going to generate revenue for the town of Monroe and be something that will enhance the future of Monroe, he would have every requirement for anything he wanted to do on this property to come back to this commission and file an application for an inland wetlands permit. He can't do anything on this property without filing an application. So again, I question why this notice of violation was issued, especially because my client had no responsibility for any of these existing conditions. With that background in mind, I do need to put some things on the record because we are here to discuss the substance of the notice of violation. It's in everyone's best interest, including my clients, to try to address these issues that were caused by a previous owner. But I do need to put some things on the record in order to make sure my client is protected legally. Once I do that, and I will be relatively brief, I will turn things back over to Kevin Soley. So, again, we question the validity and the fairness of issuing a notice of violation to an entity that only acquired the property 6 months ago. Such action is particularly troubling when the notice of violation makes it abundantly and repeatedly clear that many, if not all of the alleged concerns have existed for many years and in some instances decades before the recent purchase of the property, and that the Inland Wetlands Department has known about these issues for a very, very long time but has done little or nothing about it until less than a month ago, when it issued its notice of violation dated November 13, 2019. So without intending to waive my client's legal and equitable rights to challenge the validity and/or raise defenses to the notice of violation, and with an express reservation to raise these claims at a later date if necessary, we are prepared tonight to discuss the substance of the allegations set forth in the notice of violations. In that vein and with that reservation, we acknowledge some legitimate concerns that should be addressed, but also want to state that some alleged violations set forth in the notice of violation are not within the purview or jurisdiction of this commission, and that others do not actually constitute violations. Again, we are here to discuss substance. I wanted to put that on the record. The last thing I want to address before turning things over to Kevin is this notice of intervention that was just handed literally right before we took that break. That was about 10 or 15 minutes ago. It was handled to me by Attorney Green, who I know and respect. But again, I must question the procedure in which he did this. He said hello to me about an hour ago. When did he hand me this notice of intervention? About 10 or 15 minutes ago. Not fair play in my view. I also question severely whether a notice of intervention can apply to a violation, notice of violation. We see notices of interventions with regard to applications before commissions and inland wetlands commissions. I've never seen it where it's been allowed in a notice of violation proceeding. I don't have law to that effect. Again, I was just giving this about 10 or 15 minutes ago. It could be that I'm incorrect. Maybe it is allowed under our statutes. I don't know. But since we are going to be, you'll hear Kevin, since we are going to be coming back, I would respectfully request that until either legal counsel, learned legal counsel, gives you an opinion that they are entitled to intervene in this proceeding, that they not be allowed to intervene until it's legally established that they have a right to do so. And maybe we have to submit briefs to counsel in between now and the next date that we appear before this commission. But for today, I don't think it's proper unless, again, learned legal counsel knows the answer to this question to allow an intervention at this time.
I also don't know the answer to the question. We'll have to do some research, so I appreciate anything that you do have on that. My understanding is that for tonight, anyway, Attorney Green is not looking to speak.
Okay.
So I don't think we really need to, go down that road yet.
Excellent.
But
Very good.
I agree. Before the next meeting of the commission, we hopefully will have the answer to that question.
Very good.
And
Thank you.
proceed accordingly.
Thank you very much. That concludes my remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Soli. Or Soli, sorry.
Soli, no, it's great.
Sorry.
Thank you, Attorney Finn. And again, so I kind of want to just kind of run through some of the history on the property. This is obviously a large piece of property that's got a number of items to it. There was a lot alleged in the violation, a lot of which does require some additional study, and I kind of want to just run through the history to kind of clarify some of the points that were in there to make sure that everyone knows kind of where it's been and where it's going. I did have the opportunity to work with the former property owner for a period of time. There was a time where our services, stopped prior to this. Since the property did change hand, we have been engaged by the current property owner, Ashland Land Holdings, and we've been actively working with them to kind of address some of the deficiencies. We've been working with them to transfer and file permits with the DEEP for both the stormwater industrial general permit and the construction general permit. So that's been ongoing. We've been providing SEC inspections, identifying and recognizing where there are deficiencies on the properties that need to be addressed and providing those inspection reports. So we have been trying to work, and they've been, again, very open to how do we figure out what's going on here, how do we get this thing back to be a contributing parcel to the town. So just to orient everybody, here's the aerial of the town of Monroe. This is on the northern edge. So this was all part of the Pepper Street Business Park, which has been developed over several years, probably going back to about 2002, 2004. The two sites that were noticed were 64 Cambridge Drive, which is south and access through Cambridge Drive. So again, just this is Route 25, runs north-south. Pepper Street, which is a loop. The northern end of Pepper Street intersects Route 25 comes through here, and then Cambridge Drive is that left-hand turn, which feeds into the Pepper Street Business Park, which again has been developed over several different phases. Phase one of the business park was really the establishment of Cambridge Drive. It included the entrance in, and it kind of ended and terminated prior to getting into the current property subject to the application, and it created Cambridge Drive and then a portion of Independence Drive as it came up. Section 2 and 3 were the continuation of Independence Drive to the north, and then Section 4, which was modified a number of times, established the end of Cambridge Drive to actually continue into this property. This is a lot line revision plan, which actually modified lot lines at one point, 64 Cambridge Drive, 4 Independence towards the rear. And as you can see, as part of this application at one point, Cambridge Drive extended into the property, kind of past this wetland crossing, and was duly awarded permits by the Wetlands Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission. Section 4 at one point was obviously was further modified to establish this and then create Independence Drive to the north and had some lots to here. That was further modified through a site plan application in which this was an approved plan, which I think was granted in 2006, and all of the operations on the site were conducted through this special exception or site plan permit to construct 2 large industrial buildings. At the time of this approval, there's actually a letter in the file from the wetlands agent at that time, which said that a wetlands permit was not required as part of this process because the limits of disturbance were outside of the regulated area. So that's I wanted to make sure from a clarification standpoint that was established for the record that the ongoing operations on site were and have been completed in accordance with an approved, or as part of an approved site plan. So this shows kind of Cambridge Drive extending into the property, which did include a bridge at one point. That road terminated somewhere inside the property, and then there were some detention basins which were proposed at the time, and then extensive earthwork operations in order to establish what this future development would look like. So that took place probably in 2006. Work continued for many, many years. And then in 2014, there was a notice of potential violation issued to the property owner at that time, in which we were working on we were engaged and we were working on that project. As part of that, we really needed to understand and assess what was going on. So part of that is there was a formal memo response submitted in 2014. And what we did is we kind of looked at, we had to get an updated survey of the property, understand where the limits of disturbance were, where the wetland limits were, and this was a figure from a response that we had provided, which shows, again, Cambridge Drive from a public road standpoint extended all the way into the property. This showed wetland delineation from 2004 and approved limits of disturbance from 2004 were shown in green. The wetland limits in 2014 and the limit of disturbance at that time were shown in blue from 2014. We kind of looked at this and understood a comparison, figured out where the limits of disturbance had exceeded into beyond where they were previously. And as part of this, we worked with this commission, or the Wetlands Commission at the time, to come up with a remediation plan on how to address this. That was formally established through the Section 4 re-subdivision, which was filed for in 2015 and approved by the Wetlands Commission, which essentially pulled the limits of Cambridge Drive from further into the property down to an established cul-de-sac right in front of 50 Commerce Drive, or 50 Cambridge Drive, which is Axle Plastics. As part of this approval, it had extensive stormwater quality, the establishment of the cul-de-sac, the removal of this portion of public road through here, and permitted the driveway entrance into 64 Cambridge Drive, and also cleared up and cleaned up that notice of potential violation from 2014. So part of that included the establishment of a water quality basin to accommodate stormwater runoff, and extensive wetland mitigation areas interior to the property. You can see this little inset here is further into the property, which had, wetland plantings and things like that, which addressed that notice of potential violation from 2014. So I think there are some comments in the notice of violation that said a formal plan was never submitted. A formal plan was in fact submitted through the re-subdivision of Section 4 and duly approved by this commission. A pre-construction meeting for this application was held in 2017. The former property owner never formally moved forward with the construction of that, but that is a permit that is valid, and the work for that is being completed and has been taken over as part of the acquisition of the property. The new property owner did file a bond associated with that and is going to be moving forward with the completion of this re-subdivision work to formally and effectuate the permit that was issued by the commission. So there are a number of other allegations in that violation, and a lot of which need study. So at this point, the applicant, or not the applicant, the property owner is simply, requesting some time from this commission to kind of do a full assessment of the property. We need to go do an updated survey to really understand where we are from a topographic standpoint, where those limits of disturbance have been, so we can kind of really understand and evaluate some of the assertions made in that violation. We have engaged Bill Kenny, soil scientist, to actually go out and redelineate the wetlands to really understand what the current snapshot is, and then we're going to be able to compare that to both, prior to approval, and then obviously what we did from a 2014 standpoint. There's assertions in there about complete destruction of all vernal pools. I'm not sure if there was anything provided that substantiates those claims. It seems like a very overly aggressive statement to make, because these vernal pools were studied and analyzed in 2014, and then again, it was most recently, as I think 2017, as part of a re-subdivision application which was applied for on 36 Timothy Hill Road. And at that time, those vernal pools still very much existed and still very much had vernal pool obligate species. So we're not exactly sure where that assertion came from, or if there was anything, from a town standpoint, or from a, clearly there's someone else with interest on this property who's looking to intervene on the violation. I don't know if they provided anything from a evidence-based standpoint that supports some of these claims, but obviously what we need to do is really kind of analyze this, understand the current condition, and develop a path to move forward. The property owner has been actively working with the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Regulation Subcommittee to identify and address the way to move this property forward, to make this property to restore it from how it's been disturbed by the prior owner, and make this a contributing property for the future of the development in this town. And it just takes time to do that. We've been working with them to determine how we're going to move forward from an application standpoint, from planning and zoning standpoint. And obviously, we need to understand that so we can come back to this commission with a formal application to do remediation. So, at this point, we'd be happy to answer any questions we have. Again, a lot of activity happened on this site for a number of years. The new applicant, or the new property owner, has only had it since May, and we've been working with them to try to really get our arms around what's going on here and how to get this thing restored and remediated. So we'll need some time to kind of do a full formal analysis. Some of those things, pools, but we're actively working on an updated survey, and our soil scientist has been released to go do an updated wetland delineation. And then over the next several weeks and months, we'll be able to kind of come back to this commission with a formal report, formal analysis and assessment of where we are, what, if any, of these violations can be supported, and what the best way to address this is as we move forward. So, with that, we'd be happy to take any questions from the commission, but we're really at a point where there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to be looked at, and the new property owner, again, wasn't the verb in any of this. This thing kind of happened for a number of years, and we're happy to open up the dialogue.
Yep. Anybody? Mr.
Kevin, thank you. Kevin, what work is being done up there now, and what permits is that being done pursuant to? Were the existing permits that the owner?
So again, at the time of conveyance of the property, the property owner was relying on legal opinion letters issued by a very well-respected legal attorney or legal firm in the state of Connecticut, which basically said that their planning and zoning permits were good and valid through, I believe, March of next year. So the operation that kind of continued on the property since acquisition to today is being done underneath that permit. But the big thing is trying to make sure that we can fill in the hole that has been created on this property. Now, since acquiring the property, any and all material that's brought onto the property meets the definition of certified clean fill in accordance with DEEP. In addition to complaints made to the town of Monroe, there have also been complaints made to MSHA and the DEEP regarding this property. I can tell you that MSHA has done an inspection on the property. DEP Air Quality came out, did an inspection on the property, and neither of them found any actionable items associated with the complaint filed as part of those inspections. We haven't seen, or I haven't seen any reports from those agencies. I know that the Water Quality Division also came out, I believe, last Friday. But again, we've been actively working with DEP since the new owners acquired the property to convey and to transfer the existing permits that existed on the property from the prior owner. So again, we've been involved. We've been understanding kind of what's there, and we've been recommending, and they've been incorporating a number of corrective measures already to ensure that you know these issues are addressed and they're taking the right steps as they move forward.
The excuse me, the fill that you're bringing in now, how is that documented as being certified?
So there is the new owners have a fill intake protocol, which essentially establishes and documents that every load that comes in has to come from a source, and those entities bringing that material in has to provide, you know, a certification that it meets those clean fill definitions. So that's something that gets identified and cataloged with each truckload that comes into the property. And we've been working with town staff, and we're actually kind of creating an overall fill intake protocol that the Planning and Zoning Commission will likely establish and require for all future applications. And you know, it's interesting because your standard site work jobs, right, your standard site work operation, if there's fill required, there is no reporting requirements to the local municipality or anyone else. You know, through this, as part of trying to rectify this, there's work to actually create something in the regs so that any and all property in the future is adopting these types of requirements.
Is this fill being used to fill in areas which may have inadvertently or otherwise become wetlands over the years?
No, and in fact, there's you know, there are portions of the site that have been excavated to deeper elevations. Any material that has been placed in there is native virgin material. But right now they're trying to really kind of get their arms around how to do this in the right manner.
So the areas that are being filled now, you maintain that's under an existing permit?
All of the operations on the property right now are being done under the site plan approval that was granted by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And again, there's a letter in the file from the then wetlands agent saying a wetland permit wasn't required for that work.
And does it affect any existing wetlands?
So any of the work that's that's being completed is there's a wetland corridor. Go back to this one. There's a wetland corridor to the east of the site, and there's a wetland corridor to the west of the site. All the operation is really happening within the interior of the site. Mm-hmm. So and again, from our observations, we haven't seen any direct wetland impact in some of these areas. And again, as part of that Section 4 re-subdivision and that response and analysis that was done in 2014, we identified and recognized some areas to kind of focus on what they could do from an improvement standpoint.
So the work that you can say that the work that you're doing now, that's being done now, does not affect anything that this commission would necessarily deal with?
Well, I think there's certainly been, subsequent to the 2014 assessment, there's definitely been activity prior to current ownership that expanded beyond the bounds of what was likely approved previously. Mm-hmm. That was done by someone else, and the current property owner, again, needs to understand where those limits are and how we can address it moving forward. But the activities that are going on right now are not further exacerbating any of those things that happened or took place previously, and it's really trying to, again, assess how they can get this property productive again.
So I just want to kind of understand where you're going with this. So are you asking the commission for time to come up with a program that addresses all the concerns where what you're doing now doesn't necessarily affect what what our concerns would be? Or
Yes,
is that fair to-
so with any other, so there have been plenty of other areas in town where there have been violations or potential violations. In my experience, it's been whoever the receiver of that is needs to really assess it and then come to the commission with a plan on how to remediate it. So at this point, we're requesting some time to really fully assess the condition of this property, to bring forth an application to really address and remediate it. The current activities on the property, you know, based on what our discussions, none of them are, you know, exacerbating or creating any additional potential wetland impacts associated with what's going on. You know, there was some dewatering happening and taking place where, you know, subsequent to us performing inspections and before we were re-engaged to perform inspections, there was some dewatering that wasn't necessarily done in accordance with the SWIP that was established for the site. Since we've been engaged, that's all happening through, you know, making sure it's going to the correct sedimentation basin, and it's also being discharged into a silt sack that's surrounded by silt fence and hay bales to ensure that there is no sediment, you know, being sediment-laden water leaving the site to the best of the site's ability. But there are, I mean, the site had issues for a number of years, so there are items and elements that need to be kind of continuously addressed and looked at. And again, we've started the inspections again. We're doing the required monitoring in accordance with DEP requirements, and we're providing continuous recommendations on how to really improve what's happening.
Council indicated that there wasn't violations noted before, but you acknowledge there were violations that were noted and
so there was
perhaps not followed up as well as they could have
Well,
been.
so there actually was, it wasn't a formal violation. I believe it was a notice of potential violation that was issued. We then did an analysis, we submitted a response, and then from that response, we submitted an application to address that notice of potential violation. That did take place. I think there was, you know, and I think in the notice of violation letter, it said a plan was never submitted. A plan was submitted and approved by both Wetlands and Planning and Zoning to re-subdivide Section 4 and to address some of those issues that were established back in 2014. Again, from that point to today, there have been a number of other activities on the site which were probably outside the bounds of what was previously approved. And that's what we really need to kind of pick up where we left off in 2015. You know, these items for the re-subdivision of Section 4 are going to be completed, are going to be implemented. But the balance of it, and as you go closer towards Independence Drive, that's where we need to kind of really understand exactly what the condition of the property is.
But Commissioner, I think one of the concerns that was voiced was that this is such an old problem, we gotta start dealing with it.
Absolutely.
So from that perspective, what time frame are you thinking, you know, in order to get to some conclusion on this, rather than just fill up holes and forget about it, ever existing?
Of course.
What time frame would, I guess what, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth either, but I guess what you're gonna be asking is that we hold off taking further action until someone can put in place some sort of a plan.
Well, I think that's the prudent way to move forward. I think
And given that, what is the
Yeah.
time frame that you feel is appropriate?
So there are components that we can look at and analyze and address sooner rather than later. We can understand, we can get an updated survey. We actually scheduled to fly a new survey tomorrow, but with the snow on the ground, that's gonna have to get delayed until potentially Saturday or next week, right? And then there's gonna be time to pull together that map to really understand where we are from a topographic standpoint, from a vertical standpoint. The soil scientist has to get out there and delineate the wetlands, and this is a very big site. There are a lot of wetlands that need to be delineated, and then we have to pick up all those flags and understand where those limits are based on where they were historically, so we can really understand, have there been any direct wetland impacts that need to be addressed now? We don't know. We need to understand that. And then, you know, again, some of the assertions about vernal pools, the vernal pool season is in the spring, so we wouldn't be able to answer those questions and do a full vernal pool analysis until, you know, April, May. But I think what we would request is probably, maybe 60 days to kind of do an analysis of what we can and then come back to this commission and say, this is what we know, this is what we understand the condition of the property to be, and how to, what our proposal is going to be to kind of remediate it. We don't want to wait until May to bring an application in to actually restore this property. One of the things we're working on with planning and zoning is what mechanism are we going to do that from a planning and zoning standpoint? Is this a fill permit application? Is this a special exception permit application? We're still working on that, but I think we need some time to assess, and then we're gonna come in with a formal application to get this property restored. I don't wanna wait until May and the vernal pool season is up to get that application in, but we do need at least a little bit of time to really understand what the condition
Do
is.
you want to pick a meeting off the calendar now and
Is the calendar
Do we have a
updated
calendar?
for 2020?
Not,
Not
we have
yet.
to vote on it
Oh,
tonight.
okay.
So, no, not yet.
So you're recommending 60 days plus or minus to the,
I can
whatever
give you
meeting falls, Father?
a
Give us,
Yeah, I can tell you what it would most likely be.
If you could tell us some meeting dates, we'd be happy to pick one.
Yeah,
I'm going
hold
to read
on.
those off in a minute.
Maybe sometime in, let's see, the second and fourth
Chairman,
Wednesday,
it
so
might be
maybe the
appropriate to
second
put a
Wednesday
timeline
in
of 60
February?
to 90 days or something, rather than try
So
to set a
February, that would be February 26th.
That's the fourth, or the fourth Wednesday?
Uh,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it would be.
It's gotta be, because otherwise we can.
Right.
37, something. Yeah, that's the fourth Wednesday.
So probably, we'd be happy to take that date, or if the commission wanted to do it 2 weeks earlier, middle of February, we'd be happy to.
which
No,
would be February 12th.
I can assure you this, the applicant is as motivated to get this issue resolved and get on a path to move forward as everyone standing in your seats. Sitting in your seats.
We'll say that at the latest that date, and then if you want to present before that and you have
Yeah.
all your stuff in order, that's fine.
Yeah,
The latest February 12th,
The,
or
uh,
the 26th.
The 26th. We'll say 26 is the limit, and then
Okay.
coming before that if they're ready. Is there
Chairman,
any other
Mr. Chairman,
com-
I think there's a bit of a complication that we have to understand here. If we do this, the understanding would probably be under the assumption that the town is not prepared to take further steps in the meantime. At least, I'm sorry, as far as the inland wetlands violation is concerned. So we have to be able, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth either. I think the commission needs to have that discussion and conclude if that's a step that we wish to take.
with this?
They said that would have to be part of the understanding.
Yeah. Well, right now, they're saying how much time they're going to need to come with an application.
I think
to
that's
address the
well,
violation.
I like that approach
Well,
myself, but
yeah.
I think the commission has to be agreeable to that.
I think we need time to assess. And then I think what needs to happen with this commission, what we'd like to do is come in with our assessment and then work in concert with you to develop, we don't want to do our assessment and then bring an application forth without discussing that assessment with you and making sure that what we're going to be proposing is in line with what your expectations are.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but what I was trying to suggest is that the commission as a whole might, and maybe legal can step in, but I think that we can make a quick decision to do that.
Okay, well, first of all, let's see if, before we do that, any other questions from any of the commissioners?
I have.
Sure. Go ahead, on my left first, please.
I was wondering if I could have a written kind of an outline of what you just explained to us from your point of view.
Sure.
You mentioned dates, you mentioned applications, you mentioned all
Sure.
kinds of permits and that kind of thing. We have them from our office, but I want to hear them from yours. I sat on the commission for a good deal of that time.
Yeah.
And I don't remember a lot of this stuff, so I want to be able to see what it was, that your take is on it, and how
Yeah.
I remember it, and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So that would be something else that would be lovely. And the other thing is I want to clarify is that one of the things I do remember is in the second application for the Timothy Hill subdivision.
Yes.
We had Mr. McManus as the soil scientist and wetlands expert. And he did state that I think it was vernal pool number 1 had gone from a tier 1 down to almost nothing. And his, he found no life in it. He found, I think it was dewatered also. And his assumption was that it was due to activity off-site. Just wanted to put that on the record that there was some
And
kind of professional
I'd
testimony
just like
for
to
that.
provide one clarification, because there was, in 2014 or 15, there was a vernal pool assessment done by Environmental Planning Services, which was James Cowan, Michael Klein, and Eric Davison, that group. In 2017, as part of the 36 Timothy Hillary subdivision, we didn't switch to Jim McManus.
Well, I might have
It was
to-
actually Bill Kenny.
It was Bill Kenny, okay.
It was Bill Kenny who provided an analysis, and at that point, the approval for Section 6, for the continuation of Independence Drive to Timothy Hill Road, had the road in one location. The modification proposed to move that road slightly south, a little bit closer to one of those vernal pools. In both assessments, the only vernal pool obligate species in that vernal pool, the one that was inching closer, was fairy shrimp. So I think there was, vernal pools, water levels fluctuate. You only have to have, I'm not a soil scientist, but my understanding is you only have to have, those conditions once every 7 years to be considered a vernal pool. I think the larger
No, we don't
the
have
larger
to, I just
area
wanted to put on the
here-
record that there was some testimony.
There was.
That expert felt that was due to the activity offsite.
Well,
That's all we need
yeah,
to, we
no,
don't need to
there-
go into any.
there very well may be. I mean, part of this whole thing was, part of the approval was considerably, taking out a large mountain. So that the crest of that hill was through here. So by lowering the site, that maybe did potentially alter the watershed contributing to that wetland. And part of our analysis is how do we bring these grades up and restore some of that hydrology? That's part of what we need to look at, because in order to really make sure we're addressing it, that's what we want to do.
That's my only
Yes,
question.
sir. Commissioners, am I right?
So no pumping of water, no fill's gonna be brought in for the time being?
So there is a desire to get out as quick as possible. Any material that would be filled within that lower area would be clean, native material, and has existed on the site prior to, again, current ownership. So there may be some dewatering as part of that, but any of that dewatering has to be done in accordance with DEP requirements, the town of Monroe requirements, and that there's adequate, protection measures in place to not create any, sediment disposition into the natural resources.
So there is oversight.
Yes. We're actively doing SEC inspections, in accordance with DEP requirements, so that's minimum weekly, and after every rainfall event, over a 1/10 of an inch of rain.
Just finish on this side.
How can we get that information to us?
We can certainly provide copies of our inspection reports. Obviously, I don't, again, the owner is as motivated to get this thing resolved and to get this thing in the right shape as everyone. So we can certainly provide our inspection reports. It would please the commission.
Anything else on this? Am I right?
Mr.
Commissioner, are we have-
Yeah,
go ahead.
in the event that the intervener can successfully demonstrate that he has a role, a proper role in this, it might be, and I'll leave this to the town attorney to express a view on, it might be appropriate that we allow him to address this concern right now.
Hold on for a second. Hold on. Let's let the town attorney.
I think we don't know the answer to the question yet, that's the problem, as we discussed.
No, I don't think so.
I-
I don't think you get to say anything unless your intervention is allowed, and we've already determined that we're not sure if your intervention is allowed, and until we do, I must respectfully ask this commission not to hear from Attorney Green until
This
we
is
know
not
he can intervene. He can come
This
back.
is not you're correct, it's not a public hearing. So we have to follow the rules of,
You need to rule on whether or not his possible status would allow him to ask a question or to voice
we
an
determined
opinion.
that
And the town attorney needs to.
No,
weigh in on it.
I want to know first whether this is a proper petition.
But if I
And
I'd
there's
like
going
to
to,
make
there,
a comment.
there's
If I
going
use-
You're not
to,
allowed to make
there,
any comments.
there's going to be an opportunity.
Excuse me, the chairman has to rule on that, not you.
let's take the,
I'm just echoing what your counsel said.
I just have a comment to offer. I am an abutting property owner, so even if I don't have intervening status, this is a discussion by this commission, and this commission can receive input from me as an abutter.
It's not
No,
a
it's not-
public
it's not a
hearing,
I understand.
Joel.
It's a discussion.
I
There, unfortunately, I think what happened was you missed the opportunity at the very beginning of the meeting where there's public participation, and we really can't do anything about that. It's not a public hearing at this point. So you
There
can
was
certainly
the
come here at our
opportunity
next
to do it.
meeting, and you can come to our next meeting and make a comment at the beginning of that meeting where we have public participation.
There was that opportunity in the beginning of the meeting for anyone from the public to speak.
Mr. Chairman,
Well, I filed a
Just
petition to
disagree.
intervene, and if this is the way it's going to go, I would submit that I do have standing to intervene, which defines proceedings, not public hearings. The statute refers to proceedings. This is a proceeding of this commission. The law is clear that it is broader than public hearings, and if this is the way it's going to be conducted, I claim intervener status, and I claim the right to participate in this hearing, with all due respect. And I understand and I respect Attorney Finn's comment, but I did submit a petition. When I submitted the petition, I did provide Attorney Finn with a copy, and that statute, 22A19, says that I can intervene in a proceeding. And it doesn't limit it to public hearings, and there's Supreme Court law on that.
And I am
here, and if the commission is going to take any action on this, then I expect, on behalf of the intervener, the opportunity to comment before the commission makes any determination on this. And I don't mean to be, I just had a brief comment, and if Attorney Finn doesn't want to yield on it, then unfortunately I'm in a position where I need to press my petition, and I don't do so happily, but I think that there's some information that is critical to this commission before you allow the applicant to continue to fill this property while it does its investigation for the next 2 months.
How about you discuss that with staff?
No way.
I mean, what we may have to do then is
Mr. Chairman, may I have the floor?
we may
No,
not have
no, you cannot, not
a
yet.
choice then, but to continue the matter before the commission makes a decision. If he's going to press this, I don't know the answer to the question at this point. You had told me before you were not looking to speak tonight, which is why I didn't think this would become an issue. So perhaps this will need to be continued until we can decide.
And I did say that, however, it did not occur to me that this commission would allow the property owner to continue to fill its property while it's conducting an investigation of where wetlands are and what's involved in the property. And that was not within my expectation. And if that is what the applicant plans to do, and the applicant's been a bit vague about that, they're going to continue to fill.
I must object. Again, counsel has spoken. I agree 100% with what you said. You said it now 3 or 4 times. He's not allowed to speak unless he has a valid notice of intervention. I agree with you. I don't think that generally that's allowed in this type of proceeding. I may be wrong. I want you to know I may be wrong, but to be given this 10 minutes before this hearing commences is not right, especially because another attorney representing the same client appeared at a hearing about 2 or 3 months ago, or at least a meeting, I should put it. It was a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is no surprise to his client. The proper proceeding here would have been to file this notice of intention to intervene a long time ago. This letter was issued on November 13th. So this is
Okay,
an attempt.
notwithstanding, he didn't have to do that. I understand your point. If he has the right to intervene, he could file it tonight. The problem is, I think we all recognize it is not clear right now. Attorney Green, if you have a case that you can give me, if you have some legal authority you can give me, I would be happy to have it from both sides. The problem we are in right now is that we don't know the answer to the question. And therefore, I think if you're going to continue to object, we may have no choice but to continue this until we can answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, may I have the floor?
I have to speak to the attorney. Does that mean we just make him stop right now? And
Yeah, we may have to have it.
Point of clarification, I can maybe assist you here. An intervener has absolute right to come in any meeting, let me finish, and issue this notice. The only criteria of the intervener status being expressed is there is action or possible action of the committee which may result in a pollution incident in
We
broad
don't-
sense.
We
That is
all
it.
agree from a legal standpoint, it is not clear that this is the type
It is
of
absolutely
proceeding.
100% clear, and I swear that that is the case. Now, the chairman can make the call, okay? We could have solved this very easily if council would have just simply allowed him to make a statement, and then we could have moved on.
I'd call a short recess, 5 minutes, please. Set? Okay, the discussion on this notice of violation is gonna have to be tabled until the next meeting, where we'll be able to, determine these, notification of intervention to see, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, establish this situation.
Will determine if there is the legal right to have an intervention in this type of proceeding, and there's an understanding from counsel on both sides that they're going to provide me with legal authority to help me make that decision. And therefore, when we come back on what will likely be January 8th, once the commission votes on its meeting schedule for next year, at that point in time, it will be clear whether your client, Attorney Green, has the right to intervene, and therefore whether you have the right to speak on his behalf or not. So that is the reason for tabling this matter now and continuing it until the next meeting.
I just want to thank the commission for taking this issue seriously and for the urgency of doing it. Wish you all happy holidays.
Same here. Really appreciate the diligence and the thoughtfulness. Obviously, we're here representing our clients to the best of our ability, and thank you for your time.
Understood, thank you.
Thank
So we'll be moving on to the next item.
But before we totally close it out, Arnold Karp, the new owner, he did want to address the commission to kind of put a face to the whole, our side, if that's okay. I mean, he's the one who received the,
Well, I mean, he can do that. He can do that next month now that it's been.
oh, so we were, okay,
Kind of
sorry.
push it to the next
Okay.
meeting. We're already,
And
it's
that's
already
just at
there.
this point.
Well,
kinda hit the-
he wanted
hit
to
the
say,
stop.
he wanted to
Stop,
introduce himself
sorry.
and let you know there was a face to the name and it wasn't just an empty.
But this way, we don't get into any issues.
Of course.
with- Any more issues
course.
with the legal intervention.
Sorry.
That's the
Yep.
reason.
that date again is?
January.
Tentatively January, if we'll vote on that tonight.
It will be
find out.
posted up on the town website, and we'll let Kevin know. Or everyone know.
Thank you. Moving on to remediation submissions, IWV-2019-03, 48 Cold Spring Road, unpermitted structure and debris in a regulated area. And this has been postponed.
Yes, we had a letter of postponement to the next meeting.
So that'll be postponed to the next meeting. Moving on to IWV-2019-05, 244 Webb Circle, construction of stone fence to mark the conservation area.
That one, if you want me to bring up, that was the one where the house was built in the wrong place. So the property owner's not here. I'm asking the commission if that could be a staff review.
So you did get the submission to review already,
Right.
so that's why she's asking you for your input on this.
to me.
Mr. Chairman, if I may interrupt quickly, I'm gonna have to excuse myself for the evening. Sorry.
Okay, Commissioner Weinberg is excusing himself for the remainder of the meeting.
Yeah, we already talked about the Web Circle. That's the one that's on the
The house wasn't built.
funny hill or something, and
Right.
they built it in the wrong spot.
And we had talked about having them come back with a plan with a wall on part of the conservation easement.
Yeah, so
That's the
that
plan
way
they
they don't
submitted.
fall down the hill or
Right.
push stuff down the hill, yes.
So that was the plan that was submitted, and he cannot make it to the meeting, so I'm asking on behalf, can it be done internally?
Yeah, that's
Yes, you
fine with
know,
me, yeah.
Can we just add a few comments?
Well, yes,
Yeah,
that's,
okay.
if there's any
So we'll
comments.
discuss-
Does anybody else have any comments before I just jump on the bandwagon?
No, go ahead, Commissioner
Okay,
Stein.
I had very few, actually, the only thing, the farm wall seems a little short. They talk
What, the
about-
height?
Well, the height of the farm wall, it's only a foot and a half high, that'll sink in no time.
I thought it was 2 feet high,
No,
okay.
it says 1.5 is what it says in the details, and
Okay.
2 feet wide. So I would like to see it higher.
Okay,
It could be a little wider as a result, since it's usually, by the time you build a farm wall, it dissolves. And the other thing is markers.
Which type of marker?
regulated area markers.
So you want the in the wetland, not the conservation easement markers?
That would be my, yeah, every 50 feet and have contour changes or angle changes or something? Is that usually what we do? Okay. That's my only comments. Other than that, it's fine.
Commissioner
Feel
Lemon,
free,
right?
guy.
I'm good with that, good with what Commissioner Spence said.
Do we need to make a motion?
It's being staff
Yeah,
review.
it's a
To
staff
move it
review.
to staff.
Well, yeah, maybe make that.
Oh,
Okay.
I make a
Alright.
motion that we allow our staff to handle the remediation process.
I'll
A
second it.
motion by Commissioner Greengrass, a second by Commissioner Spence. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstentions? All right, motion passes.
Well done, you got that right, I know this.
Did I? I wasn't even sure, honestly. I question myself every word that comes out of my mouth.
Well done.
Wait, and he knows?
Hey, nose work, it's the same thing, it means the same thing.
No, he's just been around for a long time. What's the answer? Is that a fair answer?
Yes. Excellent.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so moving on, we're at, application hearing determinations, we don't have any of those. No other, we're at, deliberations on completed hearings. Complete items from the agenda, that's also nothing.
No, wait, we had,
4 Main Street.
For Main
Street.
Street.
That hearing.
That's why.
It's okay, it's busy, it's all
I'm
right.
out.
We got you.
Did Jim say he was out for most of it?
What?
Oh, we have a quorum, good.
Oh,
Oh, wait a second.
No, we
He
don't.
no, we do not.
He
Yes,
left,
we
now
do.
we don't have a quorum.
We have Jim,
No.
Ross, and Clark, and me. That's
Oh,
four.
yes, we do.
We're all
Okay,
four.
You need
yes.
4, yeah.
Oh, 'cause you can't be
Okay.
two people.
Yes. Oh, Madeline.
You know what, just fun,
Oh.
I wish I'd known that.
But you know what, actually, that's not an issue, you should know, because as long as there was a quorum to start the meeting, even when the person has to recuse himself, you don't have a quorum, you can continue.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
You
good to
had to
know.
have a quorum from the beginning, that's the
Okay.
key.
All
It's
right.
good to know.
I
Okay.
thought you had to have all 4
All
voting
right, get
members
ready to make your
to
notes.
vote on.
Oh, yeah.
Are you coming back?
What? I'm going back, I'm coming back.
Yeah, okay.
Unless your regulations say something.
I don't know what bylaws.
I should make
Bylaws,
that
there would be
caveat,
regulations,
but,
we'll have to look at the bylaws. But fortunately, it's not an issue for tonight, so. Okay, I'm back as chairman, acting chairman. Okay, we have the deliberation section on 4 Main Street, 7182 Main Street. And this is, IWC 2019-12R. Deliberation session.
Okay, so, ooh, I mean, there's not much to deliberate on, I mean.
Well, did you come up with anything in there that, well, first of
Conditions,
all, are we inclined to send a notice of approval?
Yeah, I was gonna
A
say
letter
that,
for
yeah.
approval,
Are
okay.
we looking for a draft to be read at the next meeting?
Right,
I
yeah,
think
that's
that
what
would
I'm
be-
talking
Is
about.
the
yeah.
normal procedure? Okay.
Yeah.
So can,
Because this kind of clears up everything that was ever a problem with the last 2 years, or a year and a half.
It's gonna open a whole different
Well, no,
set
but I
of
mean,
issues, but,
I mean, they've been fixing 4 Victoria Drive, so at least it's all getting now combined to one.
let's
Just so
hope
long
so.
as they don't like drop out in something, you know, nobody's selling that one part.
Well, that's probably something we need to
Maybe
put
as
in
a
as a condition, is that if one of the owners drops out, that the permit be null and void.
Because the land hasn't been transferred yet.
Right, yeah, no, that's the
So
only
if any one of
catch.
the partners, or owners pulls out,
Yeah,
then
it could mess up the
it
whole,
could be really, so we want to put that in as a condition?
yeah,
Can
put
we
that,
do that, Barbara?
yeah. Jim, right, we should put that in as condition, because
All right.
that's the only thing that could be the
So,
mistake.
Absolutely.
It opens up the can of worms again.
non-approval,
If,
how do you want to word
how do you
that?
want this worded? Non-approval if,
No, because, you know, how we have 5 Victoria Drive is now combined.
how do we want to word that?
We'll
Yeah,
take
how
a
do
talk.
we say it, though? How do you word that?
How do you say it?
Well-
I think you say what they had suggested is that the the property map combining all three properties be filed prior to, as a condition of approval,
Ooh, okay.
right?
Okay.
So that way, it's
Oh, yeah.
one property before they start. That's my bedtime, by the way.
Yes.
Don't do that. All three
I
properties.
notice I have 15 minutes to get to bed.
Are you gonna turn into a pumpkin, Jim?
I just won't get up in the morning.
To be filed prior, that's a condition of approval prior to construction activities? Or what is that, when do we have to meet our conditions of approval?
It's no more than 170 days.
So, but
I mean,
that's-
they were stressing that they're gonna have the remediation part finished prior to they do the construction anyway. Because that was the whole issue on.
Prior to any fill.
Yeah, but they'll
Why don't
be
you say
filling.
prior to any
No,
fill
he didn't
being-
say prior to fill, because they're filling now. And once P and Z gives them their approval, because they're in front of P and Z also right now. Once P and Z gives their approval, then they're just gonna go gung ho. Because most of it's out of our area, most of it's out of our purview.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
up, it's all up next to 25. It's basically all.
Well, prior to any work
For
in
the
the,
remediation.
prior to
Yeah,
any
they're
work
fixing the
in the upper
remediation that was in the
review
back that
area.
was,
How's
that was like let go for like 3 years. They, that's all been, now they're slowly fixing that.
All right, so if we said that the property map had to be filed before, a property map had to be filed before,
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt, may I rejoin meetings?
you certainly may, let the record reflect that Jim Weinberg has returned to the meeting. At whatever time that is.
9:46.
9:46. Okay. You thought you left.
I thought I was still, but.
Oh, okay, well, welcome back.
I'm not sure where you're at, but.
We are, at the moment, we're discussing the inclusion of all three properties into
Right.
one, and we're trying to figure out how to word it.
What we can do, and what I think the applicant actually suggested at one point was to put in a clause that it is subject to, or one of the requirements will be the map showing the construction, showing the
Prior
joint.
to what? Because we want the remediation to happen.
Okay.
You see, this is a technical kind of
It won't have to be worded prior to. One of the conditions is the filing of the map, bringing the properties together. In other words, when the properties are finally joined, there's a map.
right,
That
yes.
must be filed before this can be done.
Well, then that, see, but they have 270 days to complete their conditions of approval.
Right. And they'd have to do this before.
270 days, how long is it till October? Actually, it's about that time.
Yeah. But let me voice why I brought that up, because, and I'm not even sure I'm right, and I'm not even taking
Well, no, that's
a
what we
strong
were worried
position.
about, in case one of
Yes.
them drops out,
Right.
and then it messes up the
Do we-
whole thing.
But do we care if the other landowner has an obligation to solve this problem or not? I don't necessarily care that he has that obligation. What I don't want him to do, sorry, I shouldn't say it, I'm not thinking that the best situation is that he has half of a solution going forward on a different application, and we don't know what the application might look like. That's all. In other words, why give him a remedy, why do we want a remedy out there for that without knowing what else he's doing?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So if we tie it into this project, you can do it by making it contingent on them filing the map for consolidating the properties.
But if they don't, then they don't have to do
Then-
the remediation.
Then nothing done. Yeah.
well,
They
no.
didn't want the
The
remediation.
remediation was on 5 Victoria, Area E, was to be done at a later date.
Correct.
So we
we're
still
talking
kind of
about-
have that if 5 Victoria
Okay.
stays.
so
But then
the
we'll just have
filling
to
part,
kind of,
Yeah.
So we'll just say property map including all three properties to be
The-
filed?
the-
To be filed
What
on-
is the right word?
Filed on the land records or something, to be filed in town clerk's
They're
office.
combining all three properties.
Right,
Right.
right. Well, however the proper word.
Combining, I'll say combining.
Consolidating
because
the
I
three
like
properties into a single property, or whatever, yeah.
Filed, okay, that was one. Then, the one to be made, let's see, what else did we say? notes all over the
He,
place.
I believe he already has it in his application that they'll all be certified clean fill used, and, but I don't know if you wanna have something like that in there as well.
Right, I'm pretty sure that'll be covered at least by planning and zoning, if not by us. But that can be a referral comment.
The 270 days would end September 6th, 2020.
86 tons is under us.
What was that?
The 86 square yards is under us, so we can say that has to be clean fill.
Oh, well. Well, if they really do get it from across the street, they know exactly where it's coming
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
All right, did you write down any other conditions we talked about?
I did not. The 270 days that you were asking about is September 6th, 2020. So that would be the end of their normal conditions to get everything done.
I got a question.
Sure, shoot.
I mean, I know we talked about it, and Kevin said the same thing. The map just said remediate of that little piece, that little roadway. He did say he would take the fill out. I don't know if we want to put that as a condition, just because it's not on the map right now. I just don't want something to get missed.
We should include everything that we want remediated.
So maybe adding a note to further clarify.
All right, so remediation to include, do you want
That past driveway, it was the access way to, area
access
E.
way in, access to area E in the
Northeast, yeah.
is it northeast or is it,
Yeah,
that's
That
section,
map
is it?
kept going around in circles, I was like.
Yeah, I know,
losing
because the
track of
landfill's
where-
here, I thought that was the northwest corner where the
Yeah.
Olay was, so.
It's the northeast corner where.
So we're
the
talking
Olay
northeast.
is. Northeast section. I'm
That
not
is a
sure
big
it's north,
drop-off,
that's
though.
just it.
They moved that hill across the street down into that driveway. It's very steep.
Actually, it's not north, it's the, wait,
Yeah, they're gonna take a piece of property,
too bad they don't have grid lines like they do on some other maps, it would be great,
down
E5.
into that
Um,
driveway. Route 1, they pushed off. So,
I don't know what to call it.
yeah. I mean, they-
All right, if this is north, this is due north,
Yeah?
this is kind of the northeast corner, I think, yes, we'll call it the northeast
We
section.
built
Oh, yeah.
everything down at the bottom of it.
Northeast
The driveway is
section.
like steep and long.
And you did include planting plans, so
Yeah, he
that
did.
at least
Yeah.
is part of the whole enchilada there. Remediation to be completed, all remediation to be completed prior to October 15th.
The one thing that I did notice, wanted to mention is that there was a 33,455
Had that on my list too.
Yes.
That was their recommendation, there was a different
No,
recommendation.
that was from Scott.
Was it?
Mhm.
Okay.
There was a $30,000 bond on lot 5, on
Oh,
5
okay,
Victoria,
that's right.
that was supposed to be transferred.
It's
All right,
right
so you got
here,
the
so
bond
I
recommendation
do
of
have the
30.
bond from
Okay.
Scott signed.
33K?
Yep.
Okay. And, need the 3-year monitoring.
Yep, those are standard.
That's standard,
Yep.
okay. And you guys don't
So
really
we have
need-
specifics for the remediation, and then the other part of it will just be the 5-year, the normal 5-year
Oh, I
permit.
also, I've mentioned it in there that they have to understand that the remediation isn't done by October 15th, that the application, or the permit could be null and void.
Yes,
And that is in our regs,
right.
and it's in the statutes. So, with the, let me see,
Okay.
with the understanding that remediation prior to 10/15, with the understanding that if it's not completed by then,
The
Got it,
permanent, yeah, the permanent.
They also talked about the wetlands creation, I don't know if that was supposed to be a condition or anything, the 10-foot area around the wetlands.
well, that's in the
That's-
plan,
Yeah,
so
well,
it's
he
in the
said
plan,
Yeah,
right?
it's
So-
just,
We don't, yeah, it said that any future application would have to take that into account. They'd have to measure the setback from there,
Right.
which is the correct way, that was the correct
Mhm.
answer. You know, they can't pretend it's not wetlands and then make it wetlands and then pretend it's
Yeah,
not
right.
wetlands again.
Well, it wasn't before, so therefore it doesn't
Yeah.
count. Right?
I don't have it written down.
Now, one of the things I wanted to mention at the hearing, and I did not because I forgot, was the fact that as long as the planning and zoning is working on regulations for mixed use, they could include underground or under building parking, which would really eliminate a lot of the issues that we have with parking issues and with impervious surface
I
and
think
stuff
we gotta
like
go
that.
planning and zoning.
Well, I was wondering, could we put that in as a referral comment? If it wasn't mentioned at the hearing and we're making referral comments to P and Z, can we do that?
Underground parking?
She means under
parking.
building.
And they're building this, they're bringing this thing up 25 feet.
You'd have to change a lot of regulations in town, because we don't allow staff
Well,
parking.
it's something,
Well,
if
they
we
have
don't
to
bring it
come
up to
back.
P and Z.
They have to come
think
back
you
for
could-
site development, no?
Yeah, they
They're gonna have
do.
to come back.
Wait till they come with their application, I would say.
Well, it's good, what I'm thinking,
But
it
they're
would be
not
good
much in the
to put
regulated
that
area.
bug in P and Z's ear.
I just didn't know if this had to be,
Oh,
we
you're
can put that,
really-
you're right, we can put that note on,
Just
at
a
the
referral
end.
comment.
At
I
the
don't know,
end
you're
of it,
really
yes.
increasing the cost of that construction, it's just,
Well, I think there's all kinds of under building parking though. Why is that such an issue? I mean, they're engineers, they can figure it out.
well, no, I'm no doubt you can build it, I'm just saying the cost of construction,
Is it-
when you wanna put a building up in the air and then have elevators and.
Where is it?
It's just.
Oh, not necessarily Monroe. I'm
No,
talking
Monroe, we
about
don't
other
allow
place.
it. We don't allow
I
it.
know,
It
but
might
I
have
wish,
been a
I wish we
grandfather
would,
Monroe, but-
because it would be, or
Well-
rooftop parking, that would be awesome.
Oh my God.
Now, I have to leave the meeting again.
Wait a minute, sit down, we gotta vote. Actually, oh, we have to
No, we
vote.
don't, no, this is just for the
Entertaining,
draft.
right? Oh my
I
God.
know we gotta vote on the,
Excuse, no, actually,
no, what about the schedule?
Oh, yeah, this,
Oh, yeah,
oh,
we
wait a
still
minute,
have
wait
to-
a minute, wait, a minute. We have to have a motion for a draft approval letter to be written.
Second.
So moved, seconded. Now vote.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstains? Abstains, I said that on purpose.
Now I excuse myself.
Okay, bye, Jim.
wait, so it was, Jim, you made the motion and Lois seconded, is
I
that?
didn't
Aye.
second, no, I'm Jim.
Oh, then I made it.
Jim made
Jim,
it.
I think Jim seconded.
Oh, Jim and Jim.
Jim and Jim.
Jim and Jim.
Yeah, Jim and Jim.
Keith could come back.
And let the record.
You can tell Keith to come back now.
Jim Weinberg left the meeting at
Again.
10 o'clock.
Is it really 10? 9:58.
Yep.
Gotta be detailed here.
Keith,
Okay, let's fly through this. Because now that I know you can continue after I leave.
so there's no bond release reduction. Here, keep going, Lois. No, Lois can keep running, it's fine.
Yeah, keep
I
going.
can, until he comes back. Okay, next we
You can
have
still go
permitted
back.
use,
Well,
agent
you need
approvals
me now.
for 42 Crown View.
What's a generator?
Yeah,
We had a
that's,
time extension first,
yeah,
did?
there's,
right
Oh, I'm
above it.
sorry, I
above
didn't
it.
see that. Time extensions, IWC 2018-1RA1.
Yeah, so it's a 90-day time extension to fulfill condition A of the approval.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the approval
I second it.
of the 90-day approval.
And Clark.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstains? Abstentions. I do that for Keith.
Keith came back,
And, yeah,
9:59.
and then now we're on the agent approved
Right.
activities.
Yes.
agent approvals, yeah.
Okay, we had a new agent approval, IAA 2019-26, 42 Crown View Drive generator in the Upland Review area. I know it says 06, it's 26.
Yeah,
They
sorry.
ignore that. Permitted uses as of right, we have the typical Department of Public Works. We've got IPU 2019-18 at 4 Vincent Drive for emergency septic repair. IPU 2019-19, 71 Turkey Roost for blockage caused by beavers.
Reworded that.
We reworded that, you don't want to know what we said earlier. IPU 2019-20, 29 Partridge Drive, which is the removal of a dead tree and pruning. IPU 2019-21 at 139 Hattertown Road, removal of dead tree and pruning as well.
Okay.
And then
Well,
Now we're on.
we're on enforcement.
Item 11,
Enforcement.
But I figure I have to talk.
Deliberation on completed remediation division, which we don't have any, right?
Right,
Do we have to do something with, for independence, or is that tabled completely?
Table.
For,
I'm not,
64
64 Cambridge.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, that's just been, yeah.
That's been
nothing.
tabled,
table
okay.
till next meeting.
All right.
Yeah. Review enforcement issues, nothing, status updates, nothing, general discussion, other,
Okay,
Let him finish.
no, I'm sorry, no. I just-
IWC 2019-09, 17 Enterprise Drive, discussion of condition
They're already
A,
over there.
site development, pitch to drain away from the wetlands.
So go ahead and explain this,
There was a condition of the approval,
which I gave you a copy of.
yeah, because you have a copy of it. As one of the conditions of approval, we had said that the area of outdoor site storage has to drain away from the wetlands. Which was, they agreed upon, the applicant's engineer said, well, for me to do that, I may have to fill 4 feet in the regulated area. What do I do? Do I need to come back? And I was like, well, yes, certainly you would have to come back.
Why do they have to fill? I mean, is it on the slope to start with?
It is, do you remember where,
I know where it is on, it's behind, it's like behind
There's
the
a
building,
side
inside the
slope.
building.
he's, the message I got is like, oh, I'm gonna have to fill it 4 feet in order to make it drain towards the parking lot.
He's gotta fill, you mean like at a high point, fill feet, and then grade it away, like meaning like he has to add 4 feet of pitch to
4
shed it away?
feet, 4 feet
At the-
on the upland review area in order to have it pitched towards the driveway.
Does that make sense to you?
No, but
Okay, well, then.
Does our condition make sense then?
our condition, yes, because right now, the way that we have it is there's an outdoor storage and they're gonna have the, big carts
Yeah.
and everything is pitched towards the
Can they already
wetlands.
pave or
4 feet.
anything?
Well,
It's not, see, right now, it's not paved. They proposed it as gravel.
Okay, so we just have to pitch it
Planning
in.
and zoning requires it to be paved, so we worded it as, it has, to whether it is gravel or asphalt,
It
it's to be
pitches
pitched
into
away
the
from.
site and then to the drain.
Right.
Can we get the grading plan up on the on the screen?
Do you have the mouse? Oh, sorry.
And this
to
was,
turn
this
it
is this is solely plan, right?
Yes.
And he would, why wouldn't he have stayed for this?
It wasn't him. It was solely, but it was
was
Russ
Russ's-
Sear that posed the question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so This, I gave you a copy.
But he wouldn't know that
Yeah.
this would, they wouldn't have known that this was gonna come up?
I
And
would
it
have
was
thought so,
item C.
because Russ, I would be discussing it with
You're talking
you.
about Russ from Solly's office.
Huh?
You're talking about Russ from Solly's office.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was yeah. This could have
I'm
been
sorry, I'm just
much
trying to,
easier.
is this the right plan?
17 Enterprise Drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that just says Enterprise.
Okay, this is the right one.
Grading plan. It's gotta be in there somewhere.
Or anything that shows the finished elevations.
This is not the right one.
That's it, that's the, original building.
Yeah, I'm looking for the
But-
blow up.
It's on the top.
I need glasses, but I can't see that far with them.
I got my eyes.
Nope.
fixed, I can see.
That's not it.
That's not it?
No, that was a letter.
Oh.
That's the application. That wasn't it. It's gotta be that civil plan. There we go. Okay, that's,
That section is, that was a change too, wasn't it?
yeah,
Between two
they
meetings?
had added it.
It's
and
where, about
on-
where the septic field is, right? So that's
Yeah,
not
it's
on
right
that
over
one.
the, it's right on top of the, whoops.
He may have to come back anyway, so he mentioned something at the planning and zoning last week.
I think I know what he's talking about, but I don't see why.
It's the existing.
It was definitely, I remember seeing it on the plan, I think,
They were doing,
but it's definitely right there, like,
it's,
right,
it's right in this area, because
I think it was more there where you are now.
here,
Yeah, 'cause it was right off, it was just gonna back off that driveway.
but
Again,
that's-
I'm pretty sure we saw a plan that showed,
we did,
so.
Didn't we
did.
talk about it being on top of the reserve area?
Right, we
had an
did.
But
issue with
that's
that?
fine. No, it's okay.
well, no, it shouldn't be on top of reserve, but,
Reserve?
yeah, it's on top of the reserve for septic, you're not supposed to put weight on top of,
Oh, no, but the existing septic is fine.
yeah, no, it
Yeah,
wasn't the
they're kinda-
existing septic. This is not the right plan.
No, it was an alteration after.
I'm sorry.
But I think what you're trying to say is that they're showing grade lines going down into the wetlands.
This is like a, do you have the, hold on.
So if the thing is 20 feet wide and it's got 2 feet of pitch on it going down, in order to get 2 feet of pitch
So-
going away, that's 4 feet.
This is
right?
what he wrote. Pitching the storage area will require up to 4 feet of fill at the edge closest to the wetlands. The existing slope down the wetlands is approximately a 4-to-1 slope.
Yep.
Is it possible to grade down from the top of the fill at the storage area at a 3-to-1 slope and meet grade just above the wetland line? This puts fill in the upland review area, and are they permitted to do that?
He wants to do it all the way down to the wetland line?
Well, you can't just add 4 feet and let it stop. You have to grade it down. So that means that if you have to raise your area 4 feet and you got, what, 3
So
to
it's a
1?
4-to-1 now, he wants to make it 3-to-1, so that brings it further out.
We gotta see the actual.
No,
then
3 to
that
1
just-
would make it
Actual drawing
short.
of the
3
storage
3 to 1
area.
would make it less.
Makes it steeper.
Make it steeper, but you have
Yeah,
less
but
influence.
he's starting out farther because of where the edge of the,
Why not require a wall?
Is this where the storage area is?
We may
no,
need to do an
it's on the
amendment.
side where it's over in that area.
I'm surprised that they didn't pick that up when they were.
Is he
when we
doing
made-
that now? I mean,
Wait, no,
he's-
did we
He's in
say-
front of planning and zoning,
Yes, he
and,
Is it actually
no. There is one now, where the proposed warehouse is existing.
Yeah, I can remember, I have it in my mind as to what the
When
picture
they
is.
submitted it the last night, they submitted it that night, that was the first time we saw the storage area.
Did that end up here in electronic?
That was on the night we
form?
decided on it?
Yeah,
So they wouldn't have heard, if they didn't state to the end of the meeting.
The
Wait, do we?
storage area wasn't flat?
no, it wasn't flat.
Oh,
It
look
was
at the grading
tipped
right
towards,
there.
it was
This
tipped towards the wetlands.
That's why
That's
we
what we
said, that's
have.
why we did as a condition of approval, that they had to drain it towards the site and not towards the
Well, we
wetlands.
didn't think
How
about.
steep was it
According to this, he says it was 4-to-1.
on the storage area? Oh,
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense. Everything would go.
what was he
down.
storing there?
that's where
Oh, so-
they'd have the big heavy carts that they pull in and they fill them up back, fill them with tree trunks and everything. And
On a
then-
4-to-1 slope?
Yeah. I think they threw it on because they had to have a outdoor storage.
Here's
and
the
that
thing,
it just-
they're picked up with like a hook on the back of the truck. So they
Well,
don't really have to
I
be-
think he
It's
ought to
perfectly
come, if
flat.
he wants them changed, he ought to come to the meeting and talk about it.
Or we could say that he has to
Without-
build an
without
engineer, he has to have an
drawing, that's
engineered
discussion.
wall on the perimeter of it, so he gets the,
Do we want him to come back in front of us when he has a solution?
well, wait, if he's gonna do an engineered wall, it doesn't allow him to make any impact farther than what he has lined out for his parking area, he's not doing any more disturbance. But that's now
That's
becomes
true.
a P and Z matter. Right, the
It
wall
might be
hanging
a
out.
permit modification though, because every time they make any changes, you're supposed to be able to do your as-built right off the site plan.
But what I'm saying is, we made a recommendation that was almost, I believe our recommendation we made, or our condition, it made the actual impact on the wetlands worse than what it was before, right? By having to add all the extra fill. Now, the only way to make that fly and not cause any further impact is for him to have to build a wall.
Yeah, but you would think that an outdoor storage area would have been level. You would think that when they proposed it, it would have been a
For
level.
what he's doing, it doesn't need to be level.
Yeah, but do you wanna have a cart at a 4-to-1 slope towards the, I mean,
It's
you
not-
have
it's
a
not
large
ter-
cart
really,
going
it's-
towards the wetlands.
25% grade?
Is that what that is?
Erosion
Yeah.
issues.
That's too steep to do anything with.
I mean, 4-to-1 is mowable, but it's, you know,
It's not,
it's not,
you don't
not to
store it.
put, not to put a heavy container on it.
Oh, without having a.
Well, do you think they thought, well, that was, again, that was a condition of our approval. So they didn't have a grading, they didn't show us did they show us on a plan that, or did we just ask for
They
it?
threw it on the plan.
They threw it on the
On the
plan,
last
and
night.
it was not
And there was
flat
no
or-
grading shown?
No.
Apparently not.
I would like
Well,
to
I
see
think
it.
he's gotta
because-
come back.
I think a permit modification is necessary. I mean, it doesn't have to be
They
big deal,
didn't
but.
move grade, they didn't move grade lines, they didn't address the,
It's the one after this one, the
I
plans
think
after
that they
this.
come back
'Cause they added it on
and make the
at the last
request
little.
with a drawing, and
All right,
we can,
well,
and we can.
those
adjust
grade lines are too.
At that point.
And that's all 17 Enterprise right there?
Do you think maybe it didn't come in
There it
in
is.
electronic
No.
form?
No, that was the one I,
This one
Because he
was
did
from
throw it
October.
out at the last minute?
he
That's
threw
it.
it,
Did he hand?
oh, that's,
did he hand
yes,
the
he
paper?
handed it to us at
He
the
handed
meeting,
it to
that's
us
why
at
we
the
don't have it
meeting.
on the.
Yeah,
It might
That
be
was
on
not the last
hold on,
meeting
if
though,
he-
was it?
Sometimes he.
I don't have my paperwork from that. Was it the last meeting? No. No, it had to be 2 meetings ago.
But they handed it to us the night,
The last
at
night?
that meeting, you know,
Yeah.
and we
Last day.
reviewed it on the spot, basically.
Yep.
And we don't have it here?
There should be a paper
Probably 'cause
plan
we
in the
all-
office,
we
no?
approved it, we figured
Yeah, I'm
out
sure
what
there
it was
is.
for.
We just don't have it here.
Might be faster just to run down and get it. You want me to
Okay,
do
I'm
it?
gonna make a motion, because we're gonna keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Move that that if they want this, what are we calling it?
The outdoor storage area.
If they want a modification of their approval, then they need to come back with drawings and present it.
Okay.
Does that cause a conflict for us though, if we gave them a condition of approval?
But it's a condition, I mean, I don't know, it's a condition.
It's not a conflict for us.
I don't think it's
Not
a
a conflict.
conflict for us. If they weren't complete
Well, if
with
we
their
gave-
plan,
Well, first of all, you made a motion,
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
should second it, and then
Yeah,
have
that's-
discussion.
Sorry.
what was your motion again, Jim?
That they come back, provide information regarding why they need this.
We have a motion from Commissioner
Present.
Stewart,
I'll second.
second from Commissioner Spence. Discussion. So my question, well, it's not officially done yet, right? It wasn't.
No, they're still in front of planning and zoning.
But no, as far as our approval, was it officially finished?
We're finished.
Yeah.
So we gave them
Yeah.
approval, and then
And now they want to
with a
change it.
condition,
Yeah,
but they're not asking to change it. The condition we
But
gave
to
them.
meet the
Clause
condition,
that meet
in
the
order to meet the
condition.
condition, they're gonna be changing what we saw and
yeah, so we
approved.
need to see we need to see how they're proposing to change it.
It doesn't really matter that we asked them to do something. We asked them to do something, and they didn't supply enough information on their plan when it was brought in. And then they found out the issue.
Right.
So it's not, the onus, I believe, is on them.
I agree with that,
Not
except
us.
for I wish I could see the plan to really know that.
That's why they have to
did-
come back and show it to us.
Right, they have to show it to us.
Yeah, it may not
Yeah, but
require
if
much
they,
more
but if
than
it's
a.
the same plan that they gave to us the night that we
Well,
approved
then
it,
at
I'm
least
just
then they'll
worried.
have to say, this is what we're gonna have to do to make it
Right,
work, and then we'll
they have to
say,
come and clarify it
why don't you
to
put a retaining wall in there? And they'll say, I don't wanna spend the money, and we'll say, sorry, then how are you gonna put stuff on a 25% grade? And they'll
Right.
say, and then we'll say, and then they'll say, and then I'll say, I'm tired, I wanna go home.
All right,
All right, so,
You made a
Storm out.
motion,
all in favor of, having the applicant come back and, address our condition of approval? Say aye.
I,
Aye. Any noes?
I mean, if this helps you at all,
go for it.
Uh,
it's not on here, but you see the existing grades over here? So they just did a little bloop like that on the side of it.
yeah, I remember what it was.
So,
So, okay.
Okay, next is minutes, oh, sorry.
Yep. Minutes for November 3rd, 2019.
Is that just me?
Any commissioner have any comments about the minutes from November 13th?
Move to approve. With one change.
Okay.
On page 4, 2/3 down the page, 3/4 down the page, actually, under IWD 2014-04, is just it's a typo or just an addition of a word, and it's the word when to after prior to, and I will hand you this so you can take care of it.
Second.
Okay, fine.
We have
Okay.
a motion
Very
to accept the
simple.
minutes and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain, I wasn't here.
Oh, one abstention. Good.
4,
Commissioner
0,
Gingrist?
1.
Motion passes. And then we're doing the 2020 meeting schedule.
Okay, so what I sent you, I also noticed that I had made one mistake because Veterans Day, the November 11th meeting is actually Veterans Day, so we would have to move it to November 18th.
Are we
I don't
still
have
meeting,
one in
at-
November,
are we still meeting at 7, or do we decide to meet at 6?
We can't meet at 6.
Why not?
Too many people have work conflicts.
Oh.
Yeah, I wouldn't make it here in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we could could we make, time limitations? Could we vote on that?
I like
Well,
the look
we'll
you
have to
just
vote
gave
on
you.
that. I think.
Well, you asked me about what time to start. I'm saying, how about we talk about what time we end?
You as a chairman can make that.
You can make
decision.
that faster.
Well, it's already in the bylaws that we, unless the commission approves, that we don't start any new agenda items after 11.
11.
Are you want to
So-
look at that? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah,
So, Here
oh,
you go, take a look at mine. I do need it
Yeah, I
back,
didn't,
but
I
take a
didn't
look
print
at
mine
it.
out
and-
either.
I-
And that's just the
I
one
can't
meeting in
find mine.
November.
I never
So-
found mine.
uh,
I don't know where I did with it.
I
can't find it.
emailed it.
Oh, that's
I
why.
thought that
I
I
remember
thought
seeing it. It was on
You're
the-
talking to Ms. Ditz.
I remember seeing it. I thought it was a piece of
twice,
paper.
except for a couple of
Twice a
months,
month.
we're
No, we don't.
The November 11th is the only one that has to be changed. but-
just to change the date.
Yeah, I have to change the date to
People aren't
November
prepared.
18th.
Gotcha.
I had proposed November 11th to all of you, but then I realized my mistake. So,
Yeah, I'm a veteran. I'm not coming in on November 11th.
absolutely not.
Okay.
It's pretty standard, it's your
Yeah.
basic second and fourth.
I
Yes,
agree.
it's the same as
Yeah.
every year.
Move to adjourn.
No,
No, we have
you
to
gotta,
vote.
I make a motion to approve the change to the meeting schedule for November
And-
Is there a motion
The
for
meeting
the?
schedule as proposed.
as proposed. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay,
We have a
Second.
Second by, motion by Commissioner Stewart, second by Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Other way around.
Commissioner-
Other way
Yes.
around.
Motion by
Stewart,
Commissioner
second by
Gingrist,
Stewart.
second by Commissioner Stewart. All in favor?
Aye.
We also
All- No, any negatives?
no.
Motion to
Any
adjourn.
exception? All right, the motion passes for the
Couple
meeting
other things.
schedule. Regulation Amendment Committee,
We're waiting
Um,
for the lawyers to bring it back to us.
okay. Public Outreach Committee. No, I don't think we have anything there. And, all right, this meeting is adjourned. 10:18.